Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. Happy to be here with you today, as we're going to be talking about many issues that affect all of us, and many of them are very significant and very troubling, to say the very least. Whether that's the Ukraine and what's happening with Russia, and the fact that we're looking at the 1938 effort of appeasement, whether it's the inflation at 39-year high, 6.8%, whether it's the changes in our government or in our local community, where we are seeing many efforts being usurped to serve other masters, it doesn't matter. There is a problem here. And I believe that we should be coming across live now on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, all of the social media, from the social media giants. It looks like we are. And we hope that everyone is able to see us properly in our live stream at the moment. Let's talk about this, folks. America, where are we going? As we're about to be entering 2022, as the year 2021 comes to an end, what is going on in our nation? It's so troubling. It's so devastating to see this nation at this moment. And I think one of the things that really highlights this, and you may have noticed it, He, of course, is a NBC caster. Mr. Brian Williams ended his 20, and he ended it with the statement, and I quote here, "The reality is, I will wake up tomorrow in the America of the year 2021, a nation unrecognizable to those who came before us and fought to protect it, which is what you must do now. They've decided to burn it all down with us inside it. That should scare you to no end as much as it scares an aging volunteer fireman." It's a very important statement. And I think we need to look at that very carefully, because I think we all can take from that a very common thought, a very common thread. America is in danger. Freedom and democracy is in danger. And it has an onslaught. The things that would change it, destroy it, are widespread. Let me take a pause. I want to thank everyone for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I am the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and you're watching our live stream every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, when we reach out across the internet through all of its mediums to reach you across the world, because we believe in your unalienable right to free speech, to speak about all of the subjects that are affecting you and affecting this globe. And we hope to hear your voices. We do ask you that if you are interested, you can call into the show at 607-242-1582. Our phone line is live and waiting for your calls. You can also reach us by text and chat on YouTube, Facebook, DLive, and YouTube. And we will present that live for everyone to share your thoughts with us, because this is about a conversation. Now, we do long-form political commentary, but we talk about the things that are happening right now with all of us as well. And I know that in the last week or so, we've had YouTube shut us down in the middle of our stream. We've had social media block this channel. We want you to understand, if for any reason, any one channel shuts you down, go to YouTube, go to Facebook, go to Twitter, go to DLive. If at the worst case, see the show afterwards on Rumble. We will not shut down our voice. We will talk about these important issues. Because just as Brian Williams said on his last program in NBC, America is burning and we are inside it. And the rest of the world is watching, and this troubles them probably more than most Americans, because they look to America as the beacon, as their refuge. When you look at Hong Kong and the 47 members of their government, before they were made to disappear by China, they were singing the American anthem. They were praising America and waving the American flag, because the freedom we had, just having that glimpse of it, gave them hope for a better life. And if that better life no longer exists here in the United States, it can't exist anywhere else in the world. And it is under onslaught. I want that to be very clear, because we're in trouble. We are in trouble, folks. And I don't know if this is going out cleanly on all of the social media outlets. I'm seeing some trouble being reported by our system here, which isn't coming from us. But what I am seeing right now is that across America, we have a problem. I'll give you an example in New York City, and this is pretty big. In New York City, we see that there is now the rule. They have now instituted by law the ability of non-citizens to vote in elections. I want you to think about that. They have made it legal for people who are not citizens of the United States to vote in elections. Legally documented voting age non-citizens comprise nearly 1 in 9 of the city's 7 million voting age inhabitants. The measure would allow non-citizens who have been lawful permanent residents of the city for at least 30 days as well as those authorized to work in the United States, so-called dreamers, to help select the city's mayor, city council members, borough presidents, comptroller, and public advocate. They go on, quote, "It's no secret we are making history today. 50 years down the line, when our children look back at this moment, they will see a diverse coalition of advocates who came together to write a new chapter in New York City's history by giving immigrant New Yorkers the power of the ballot." You should be terrified by this. This is what Brian Williams meant by America is burning. Your freedom, your rights aren't disappearing. They're being removed. They're being struck down. The worst thing you could see in a voting system is to have an outside influence come into that system and change the result. And that's what's happening in New York City. It's something that's happened in San Francisco. It is a movement that is sweeping through many of the progressive cities throughout the United States, allowing foreigners to be involved in our elections and then promising us, well, that has no impact on our elections. It's the only fair thing to do. And quite honestly, that's a lie. That is a major lie. And I do want to thank Mike Bowie for being the first to make a comment tonight. They've made it legal to be illegal. And the answer is yes, they have. And this is just one of the aspects. There is an event that happened yesterday in Binghamton, New York, a protest, and I'm going to get to that to show you another aspect of this and how troubling this is. But think about this. You hear so many people telling you that your vote, well, one, it doesn't matter. And then they tell you at the same time that your vote is being restricted, that people are trying to stop you from voting. And then they're introducing at the same time individuals who don't have the same interests or concerns into the voting system. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't make it better. Somebody who's been in a city, imagine someone who came to your city 30 days ago, and they are now going to decide everything. They're going to decide what happens in your taxes. They're going to decide where your taxes go. They're going to decide who gets to run your city and your town. Imagine that. In the last 30 days, they have no knowledge of what's going on, what are the issues, where the community stands, but they're going to alter this. And they have enough numbers to change the system. Think about it. In local elections, very often, the difference in votes can be a couple dozen. In some cases, it could be 1 or 2 votes. We've seen that often. Even here in 2021, a handful of votes made the entire difference. Now imagine you introduce a 1/3 more voters who know nothing about the candidates, who know nothing about the issues, they know nothing about what the community thinks or wants, and they're being able to vote. And their impetus to be involved in your election is that someone has promised them more money. Someone has promised them a better life. Do you think that might influence it? Jason, thank you for commenting. Jason says, yeah, it makes perfect sense. They want to destroy us. Well, you could say that. But there's a lot of ways to look at this. And I want you to see, this is from my good friend, Larry Sharp. And he was speaking about this issue back on December 10th. Yesterday. And he had this, 2 days ago. And this is part of what he had to say.
But the idea is not expected to expand to state or federal elections.
I think it's federal level, no, given the current Congress.
Hold on. He says federal level, no, given the current Congress. What happens if that Congress changes?
And Larry makes a good point there. And it's interesting, and I had several questions about this. Like, how would temporary and illegal aliens be prevented from voting in federal and state elections? The ballots aren't separated. There is no special ballot for citizens and another for aliens. The corruption is intense here, and they want to make this federal because they don't want the separation. This is so wrong. Now, I want you to think about that. They want this to be federal. They want this to be statewide. They want to introduce this foreign element into our elections. America is burning. Again, Brian Williams said it so well, and it's burning from the inside. These are Americans and certain political organizations inside America that are saying we have to change and become like the rest of the world. We have to alter our elections. We have to artificially influence the outcome of elections to be like the rest of the world, when the rest of the world is looking at America and saying, no, we want to be like you. We want to be more free. Why are you changing? Jason mentions, how can they stop them? They vote, they vote. And the problem is, we've seen this. I mean, when New York State violated New York constitutional state law and said that illegal aliens get a driver's license and were allowed to be able to register to vote in that manner, this has only helped to expand that. There are over 800,000 illegal aliens. Well, let me be fair. There are 800,000 non-citizens in New York City at this time. Many of them are illegal aliens. Some have work visas. Some have visas that have expired. They comprise 1/3 of the vote in New York City. On any given year, there are about 2 million people who vote in New York City. 800,000 new people would be about 1/3 of the vote. That would change every election throughout that city. That means that changes who is elected in that city. That changes who is in charge of New York State's legislature, which affects all of upstate New York. It affects who goes to Congress and therefore affects this nation. It is not isolated to just New York City. This isn't just about one city in America. It's about the nation. And if you think that the very same people who have said, let's let the illegal aliens and the non-citizens vote in our elections are the same people who are in charge of trying to check to see who validly and illegally voted in our elections, do you really think they're going to be looking that hard? Do you think they're going to make it that difficult? The same people who say, oh, well, we'll take a mail-in ballot from anyone in an election, that want same-day registration, that already allow illegal aliens to register by their driver's license by checking a box. Do you think they really are going to pay attention to who's voting in a federal election? That they're really going to count the votes? That they're going to call this out? And therefore, this is affecting our national interests. This is a national situation. Bob Seidel. Bob, hey, it's great to see you. Bob says it's not bad enough that they cheated the election. If this continues, we will never have another fair and honest election. We have better fix our elections before 22, or America will never be the same. And I agree. And again, I'm not asking anyone to vote a specific way. I want to be very clear about that. I haven't said anyone must vote conservative or Republican, libertarian, democratic or progressive. That's your choice. That's your freedom as an American to make whatever choice you think. What I am talking about, and what Larry Sharp has been talking about, and what others are talking about, is this is an interference. This is subversion and suppression of your vote. These are people who do not have a right and do not deserve the right to vote in our nation. And they are being involved, and they are able to change everything. And imagine how easy it is to abuse the system that New York City has now created. Any nation, imagine China or Russia or North Korea, that they decide to send over a group of individuals to have a conference that will take 30 days, and it just so happens to be just 1 month before an election. And all of those individuals on the same day, for same-day registration, walk into the election, into our polling areas and sign up to vote, and they vote in our elections. And imagine how well how easily they could change who's going to be senator, who's going to be a member of Congress, who's going to be mayor, the comptroller, or any other position. And imagine how that would change your life. Jason mentions this will break the country apart. This is true voter issue. And Jason asks, how do you register an illegal? It's easy. In New York State, they already do that. In New York City, they already do that. They issue cards for anyone who's working in New York City, including illegal aliens. They are able to get a New York City registration card that says that you work in New York City. There is documentation. They instantly become documented at that moment, and that enables them to then go on with this new legislation to be able to vote. And since there is no separate record of federal votes and statewide votes versus New York City votes, they're able to vote in any election whatsoever. By the way, folks, it is quite possible that Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, they may kill this feed at any moment because we're talking about elections. We're not talking about who changed them or what are the results. What we're talking about is the potential problem posed by legislation that has been enacted. And we're asking you the question of how do you feel about that? Do you feel that your election is secure? And do you understand that this, if it is insecure, it affects the nation? It is not limited to New York State. There are, 15 members of Congress from New York City that vote in elections? 15 members? That's like, what is that, 15% of Congress? 15, that's a voting block of 15% of every law that could be proposed, introduced, and passed in Congress. And you have this also happening in San Francisco. And coming up, you're going to see that in Maryland and in Vermont. How many cities, how many members of Congress does it take for an illegal, or someone who is a non-citizen to vote in an election to introduce individuals who may not have the best interests of America at heart, but will get the vote? And now they're able to influence our nation's direction for decades to come. Mike Bowie mentions, gun laws don't stop criminals, election laws don't stop Democrats. Here's one way to look at that. But I would say it's progressives, not just Democrats, it's progressives. And that should trouble everyone. Jason from Binghamton mentions, you will be fact-checked or opinion-checked and shut down. It's a good question because, of course, that's something that's come up as well. In fact, the Toronto Sun was covering that recently. I'm glad you mentioned it. Because John Stossel, a recognized and respected member of the press, John Stossel, who has a lawsuit against Facebook for their actions on fact checkers, has determined and is in the process in the lawsuit of showing that they don't fact check. They, in fact, just go through and block opinions they don't like. One of the relevant points, and all links will be in the description so you can see this for yourself. And they say, frankly, that's terrifying. The goal is nice. Less misinformation on the internet. But you could very well end up in a place where we only have approved facts that fit the current narrative. That would be a terrible outcome, end quote. But that's the outcome we've got. Facebook and its censors are now the enemies of open debate. They're trying to suppress people whose opinions and whose evidence they don't like. They're not fact checkers, they're fact blockers. I want you to think about that. Because at the same time that we are seeing members of New York City that are saying we need to expand the vote to everyone, to non-citizens. And at the same time, we have elements like Facebook and Twitter who have said directly to the American people, and especially in the case of Twitter's new CEO, that they do not believe in the First Amendment. They do not believe in your right to free speech. They will not enforce your right to free speech, and they will censor your voice. That they will edit what people are able to say and who is able to see it. That they are willing to corral you into a singular type of thought. And they will claim, well, you're free to think whatever you want, except you have no voice if you don't agree with them, and you have no evidence that you'll be able to look at other than what they are willing to provide you. And that if you introduce evidence that they do not believe in, that they do not approve of, they will silence you. Kind of like with Hunter Biden. Remember October 2020, when the Hunter Biden laptop was found by the credible news media and was presented to the public, and they shut that down, told you it was a lie, said it couldn't be true, and that this was manipulation, it was misinformation. And 4 months later, they all turned around, those very same news media elements, and said, oh, it's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. The news media, CNN, Representative Adam Schiff, spoke to the American people for 3 years in a row, nightly telling you. Rachel Maddow told people every single night for 3 years that there was Russia collusion, that our system had broken down, that someone had abused our system. And after this end of 3 years, 4 investigations, and $30 million, nope, it was a lie. That's not true. Not one aspect of it was true. And they just went on with their day. Oh, oops, we got it wrong. For 3 years in a row, every night, got it wrong. Every aspect of what we told you was absolutely wrong. Because they don't want you to have another outlet. They do not want to hear your voice. They want to hear your compliance. And that should terrify you. That's what the fact checkers are about. And those fact checkers are troublesome because they're using a technique that we are seeing being used in our colleges as well. Earlier this week, we just covered this over at SUNY Broome, a New York State public college. And this is important. It's a public college. Your taxes pay for this. Your taxes, not just in New York State, but your federal taxes pay for this. So everyone in the United States is funding this opportunity, this situation where students are being told they must agree with institutional systemic racism, that they are being told they must accept that if they are white, they are racist, that if they are black, they are victims. They are being forced to understand that the only choices they have are to comply, that there is no other evidence. We covered this in detail. We were at the event live ourselves. We listened to every single word of this event at SUNY Broome, and we presented it to you. How they corralled every single voice, that there was only one conclusion you could make, and that conclusion was already predetermined before you entered the room. Institutional racism must be true. The progressive approach must be the only one that is used. There is no other voice. There is no other answer. As I showed you as you can see on this screen right now, what's the question? What's the question for these students to understand? Talk about a time when you felt out of place. What that experience might have occurred at an educational or religious setting or a social event. How did you feel? Share that, which on its face has nothing to do with racism. It has nothing to do with whether racism is institutional or whether it's individual. It has nothing to do with anyone's race. You could talk about, and I did have someone talking about their dance. They were talking about going to a dance by themselves. You could have been talking about going to a movie by yourself, having dinner out by yourself. There are a lot of different situations you could possibly address this with. For me, it was being in Moscow, and for the first time in my life, in Moscow, Russia, 1/4 mile away from the Kremlin, being the only American, or actually one of a few dozen Americans in Russia, and happening to be black as well, I was feeling very isolated at that moment because there aren't a whole lot of black Americans in Russia, in Moscow. Just really, that's just a handful of people. So you could say that, but the thing that's important here is, and as you see on the screen, what were the students being told? Systemic racism explained. This is in context of racism. Your answer must be in reference to racism. It must be systemic. You must determine how whatever experience you had applies to systemic racism. You're on a train and the rails only go to one place. There is only one answer, and that is the only thing you can say. Now, if you disagree with me, that's perfectly fine. I want to be very clear. This is a discussion. Folks, you can tell me, Mike, I don't see it that way. I don't get to the same conclusion that you do based on the facts that you're presenting. Okay, I can respect that. Tell me why. Tell us all why. Why do you think it's wrong if you think it's wrong? You can call in 607-242-1582 and you can let us know. Respectfully, we will hear you out. We will hear your voice. But I didn't get that because the evidence presented led us to one conclusion. There is, when I see in New York City that they are allowing non-citizens to vote, I get one conclusion. There's only one point in doing that. There's only one purpose in doing that. What nation in the world does that? None of them. No major nation does that. At the same time that we see that our social media is actively censoring the voices and the messages that are being said. And we have to take this all into context. So Philip mentions, I bet that was your favorite part about it. No blacks. I'm not sure what you mean, Philip. What? You're talking about me being in Russia, Philip? No. That's a very biased kind of thing to say. No, I loved my experience in Moscow as I worked there, as I was around many Marines and many people from around the world. It was a wonderful opportunity to travel overseas and appreciate America and how great America is. See, America is great, and you get to really see that greatness when you live for a year and a half, as I did, in a nation that isn't America. It's really interesting when you actually live in a socialist nation and see what socialism does to the people, and then you come back to America and say, isn't this a great nation because none of that happens? I can understand why so many people are desperately trying to leave every single socialist nation in the world to come to America. And they will go through the worst of situations to be able to do that, dying in the process. I love America. I love my country. I love the fact that America is the most diverse nation in the world. I grew up in the Bronx, part of New York City, which is the most diverse city in the world. There is no other city that is more diverse than New York City. There is no more mingling of cultures than in New York City. And I love it for that. And when I look in the mirror, I love me too. So Philip, when you say that, I don't understand what you mean because it doesn't make sense. Because I'm talking about America and freedom. I'm talking about thought and the ability to think clearly. We're talking about censorship. And you're trying to make this as a personal attack, it sounds like. You're trying to assume what I think. Come on, Philip, you can do better than that. So again, let me ask you folks, do you think that's the way your tax dollars should be spent? Should your tax dollars be spent, and this is for everyone in the nation because your federal tax dollars go to fund public schools in New York State, including the public colleges. And for those of you in New York State, whether you're upstate or in New York City or anywhere else, your taxes are going to this. Your taxes are going to events like this where they are telling students lies. And they are telling them that they have no other choice. They're telling them that they don't have any freedom. That they're telling them at one point in this event, they're telling all of the students there, guess what? Black people can't buy houses. That black people haven't been able to buy houses since 1860. And you can look at this entire video. It's 2 hours long. It goes over every aspect. It shows you exactly what was being said at the time. And they're inferring that black people couldn't buy houses since 1860, that the black middle class doesn't exist. Guess what? I'm a homeowner. I've been a homeowner for well over a decade. My family has several individuals who own houses of their own. And there is a black middle class. They're lying to our students, and they're not giving them any information to counter this. They're telling them nothing but this is the only truth, and you must believe it. And it's being said by teachers and educators who they are supposed to trust implicitly. It's being said by elected politicians that we're supposed to trust have the best interests of America at our heart. And yet they don't. And again, that brings me back to what Brian Williams said, America is burning, and we are inside of that. You don't have to agree. But tell me why you don't agree. Tell me, what am I missing? What is it I'm misunderstanding? I don't care about the petty personal attacks. You can save that for some other time. Tell me why I'm misunderstanding this. Tell those of who are watching this why we are misunderstanding what is going on, how we are being abused. Our finances, our economy is being abused, our votes are being abused, and our education system is being abused to create a system that destroys the fundamental blocks of freedom that this nation is built upon. And it is only getting worse. Now, you may say to yourself, well, Mike, I don't quite see that. America is not doing that bad. Things are okay, except when you look at ABC News. 2/3, one moment. Hello, and thank you for calling into the program. This is No Soundbites Allowed. I'm Michael Voss. May I ask, who is speaking?
Hey, Mike, it's Jason.
Hi, Jason. What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple things I wanted to touch on, but I just wanted to talk about what you were just talking about with college.
Okay.
And, I watched that video, and, it was interesting because, I was getting in a, kind of a Twitter kind of, debate over somebody, over the simple fact that they were saying that there is no, critical race theory being taught in the schools. And I think he was more pushing towards elementary schools and not really focused on the college. But, when I saw what you went to and did, I don't think there's a really major, difference between, high school and, well, especially that community college, because the educational level of people during that period of time, it's just a very, it's a small difference in what, people are able to learn during that period of time of their life. They're extremely impressionable. But there was a few things that I noticed, and I just thought was just so hypocritical of one of the presenter that was there giving the information out. And the one thing that I thought was really interesting is that, they wanted an open conversation. They wanted people to be able to express themselves. And then, the one thing that, the presenter said, he says, well, I don't want any Alex Jones conspiracy theories.
Oh, yes. And I did address that there's a 2-hour video of me, and in there I discussed that at length. I was shocked by that, because what is that supposed to mean?
Well, exactly. And so what it does is that it already puts, something in the conversation to say that, well, that part of the conversation is not allowed. Well, everybody's probably thinking, well, what does Alex Jones stand for? What do people say about Alex Jones, And they're all like, well, I don't want to be an Alex Jones, So what sort of thoughts, what sort of ideas, and what sort of, things do I not want to mention that will actually get me labeled as an Alex Jones,
And that's the problem. That's the fear. When you hear someone say, oh, you're just like whomever is ostracized. It doesn't matter. It could be Bill O'Reilly. It could be Alex Jones. It could be Tim Pool. It doesn't matter who it is. You're the outsider. How dare you say that? You're in trouble because you said something that wasn't approved. And that's the dangerous part about it. But go on.
No, it was extremely. And then there's other parts of it too. Is that it wasn't just a matter of having a rapport with individuals and being respectful and letting other people be able to present their perspective and their point of view, but they actually talked about the feelings of the other individuals and how not to make other people feel about what you're saying. And so that automatically puts you at a disadvantage because certain words and certain things make people feel certain ways. And if you actually have a conversation, a disagreeable conversation, people are going to feel uncomfortable. You cannot have a discussion. You cannot have a debate and have people feel comfortable. It doesn't happen, And, that was just, that was another thing that I was just like, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I mean, that program and that, seminar, was specifically designed to basically feed people a specific, perspective and make them think that it was an open forum of ideas. It was such a joke. And the thing is that really did amaze me, though, is that things like this do not expect individuals like you to go out in the field and actually report on it and to actually expose, this to this level, because nobody would have known. Nobody even thinks about it. Everybody's like, well, there's no critical race theory. We're not being, institutionalized with, these new, forms of racism. And you went out there and proved that it's there.
Well, at some risk. I've been receiving there's a very small group of individuals who have been very vocal directly to me because they're upset because I presented this information and I presented it as with my honest feelings about it. Even though there was another publication, the SUNY Broome School newspaper, which had a positive view of this, and I didn't. And they weren't upset that the information was released. They're upset about the fact that I had a negative viewpoint about it because some people were embarrassed by this. And my answer to that is, you're too thin-skinned. You should be able to take the critique. If this is a positive thing, then explain how. Don't tell me how you feel. Tell me why it's bad or good. Because I can tell you exactly why, and I spent 2 hours explaining why. That was a racist event that helped to break the community, that it was negative to our students, and it's a waste of money of our taxpayer dollars. That's the way I felt about it. Now, people can look at the video and they'll be able to make up their own mind. So far, the public, the non-academics, have looked at it and told me they agree. Academics that I've spoken to and who will not make a public statement have told me they disagree. They think that it's a positive thing to tell people they are systemically racist, that if you're born white, you are a racist. If you are born black, you're a victim. They believe that is a proper thing to tell people. I think it's disruptive and destroys our community. If people watching the program, if you disagree with that, tell me why. But go on, Jason.
Well, I mean, I think that's the point, though. I mean, the fact that you disagree with that information is one thing, and that is not really what I think is the most despicable part of that whole thing. It's a simple fact, though, is that you and a lot of other individuals, it's presented in such a way that you are not supposed to disagree with the content. You're not supposed to debate, the ideas, and that.
Yes, I don't have the freedom to have a voice to make up my mind.
No,
as an intelligent black man who's successful in the United States, I don't have the right to disagree with critical race theory, intersectionality, or gender identity politics. My voice should not be heard if you listen to what they say. That's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, and the thing is that is the way that the critical race theory is pushed. It's pushed through it's based on a Marxist ideology, that was designed, in that thing, and it uses different, tactics like, from the rules of radicals to actually implement to implement that ideology. And the rules of radicals, basically, the way that they were treating you and making you feel, and putting you in a place. Well, not just you make you feel, because I mean, obviously you're going to stand out. You're going to, you're going to do that.
I'm outspoken about how I feel.
Yeah, you are outspoken. But the problem is that other people who feel like you, who are easily intimidated, they're shut down because they're using those tactics. They're using those Marxist, those radical, techniques to basically shut people down, to make them feel like they're wrong, they're racist, make them feel that they're not worth, anything. So basically they just conform and then get in line, And the thing is that you didn't do that, and they hate you for it.
Well, it's really bad because it's not limited to our colleges. I'm going to be speaking about this in just a few minutes, but it was something that was done last night at a march in Binghamton, the southern tier of New York, a march in favor of Me Too, in supporting women and denouncing sexual assault against women. And that was usurped. It was corrupted by the progressive leaders of tomorrow. They were being used. The women protesting the abuse of women was being usurped, and those women were being used to promote the progressive ideology and the radical views of BLM and plot. So and the women couldn't speak out and it's a very tricky thing because yes, you can support Me Too. You can support women who are victims of sexual assault and say that should never happen. But when you have a foreign group, a group of progressive leaders of tomorrow that have usurped that are inserting their political messages in that venue, it gets very difficult for people to say, well, I don't agree with what Plot is saying. I don't care about their politics. I'm here to support women. But you can't say that at that event. And it's difficult to say it after the event because people are going to say, well, then you're against women. No, they're two different things. So it's not just that they're making it difficult to speak out like at SUNY Broom and to speak out about some of these things that we see on the internet. They're making it impossible to say it at things that people actually do support. And that's sad.
Well, I mean, I had a lot to say actually on that reporting you did last night. That was, I got to say, that was some really good work that you did there too. The thing is that what even, look at this, the allegations that went through and what's happening in my mind, when I hear that, it does enrage you. It does you go on the offensive. And everybody kind of gets that emotional, drive to shut them down, to say, well, how could they let this happen and all this? And then all of a sudden, when I'm watching them and what they were doing, then I had to check myself, and I realized that without facts, without knowing anything really substantial, I realized what was happening. I was being hijacked by their, Alinsky-like tactics. And I wasn't even thinking about due process at all during that period of time.
No, it was mob rule. It was a mob mentality. It was meant to it was meant to excite the emotions and cause people to react as a mob. And that's why a mob invaded a business. It's why a mob later in that night, as was further reported by other news media, they decided to graffiti and vandalize a business, and they destroyed property. So it's about that mob mentality and that emotion. And I'm going to get to that in just a moment. But before I do, I want to address one other thing that I think is important as well about how America is burning and how we are inside that and how dangerous this is, not just to the United States, but to the world. So I'm going to get to probably in 15 minutes talk about the Me Too event last night. But was there any other thought that you had, Jason, before I let you go?
No, I might want to call back and
That's fine.
Add to that the event the other night, because I do have a couple points that I want to make and maybe dig into that. But I figure I'll let you present that, because I wanted to get into the whole the SUNY Broom, because that was a huge thing that you did. I mean, you did 2 really huge events, this week, so there's a lot to talk about.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And but I want to give each of them enough time for both. So, but
Yep.
and I'm more than happy to have you call back in, and anyone else can call in as well. So I just want to make sure we're dealing with one thing at a time, so everyone's all together with us.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Jason.
Yep. Bye.
So, folks, just like Jason just did, you too can call into the program. And oh, I'm sorry, wrong button. You can call in and you can have your voice heard. Whatever opinion that you have, you don't have to agree with us. You don't have to have the same opinion that I do. That's not required. That's not what this live stream is about. And we say that every live stream, and we say that every time. We only ask that you have a respectful conversation to present your point of view. If you disagree, please tell us why. But I think it's important to understand what's going on in our colleges, and that this is how our tax dollars are being used. To institutionally, this is the institutional racism we see. Teaching our kids to believe that they are fundamentally flawed because they're born a certain skin color. And that's a problem, because that divides our nation, that separates us, that hurts our communities. And that affects everyone, because the kids who are going to college that are seeing this program, that are being fed this false information, this misrepresentation of reality, they're going out to own businesses, to work at businesses, to run for elected offices, to try and pass laws that are there to correct a problem that doesn't exist, and more often than not winds up creating a brand new problem that these very self-same politicians have not thought through. They have not thought of the corruption that they are creating and the consequences of their actions. Now, you may think I'm wrong about that. You may say, Mike, well, no. Having non-citizens vote is perfectly fine. Anyone can vote. Vote as many times as you want. Except that's corrupt. And we see what the result is of that around the world. There's a reason why the world looks at American elections and says, this is the process we want to emulate. Because even when we have the worst of problems, as we did in 2020, we peacefully transition. And yet, look at the rest of the world. When they have difficulties in their elections, it's anything but peaceful. And if we lose that because of the short-sightedness of many of the politicians out there not thinking of the consequences of what they have done, then we endanger our ability to remain the beacon of hope around the world. David Bright mentions, man, a lot of things is going on out in the whole world, and for racism, it will never end. Surely it will not. Well, I truly believe, racism is not an American thing. Let's remember that. And I know BLM likes to export the idea that racism is only defined by the way it exists in the United States. And that's why France rejects it. That's why the United Kingdom rejects it. In fact, every nation in the world rejects the BLM mentality and what they have been exporting, because it's not true. And there are different types of racism. Just ask the Moroccans in France. Ask Jamaicans in the United Kingdom. Ask the Japanese in China. Ask the Koreans in Japan. You can go anywhere in the world. There's racism of different types and different sorts. The issue is understanding other people. And we don't. And when we have things like BLM and the BLM movement, the critical race theory, we enforce the separation, not the understanding. And that is a big thing, because it has an impact when we have a generation of kids. This generation of kids, BLM, CRT, that isn't centered on you and me, grown adults. This is targeting 5-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds. It's targeting the kids in elementary school and high school right now for the future. This is the Germany of the World War II had a wonderful saying that they want to go after the children because the children means they win tomorrow. They win the future. If you corrupt the way kids think, then those kids will be corrupted as they grow. And that's the problem. That's the terror. That's a horrible thing. That's why it was so bad what Sunni Burma was doing. They're instilling racism in children and kids, young adults, who are going to go out into the world and expand and share and spread that same view of racism. And it will affect everyone across this nation. It's not isolated just to New York State or to the United States for that matter. Bob mentions, you remember that critical race theory was also being taught at MacArthur Elementary School. I do. April 21st of this year, I spoke out about that as well. When the principal was caught reading a book to students, that book was a book saying that black kids are victims, white kids are racist, and that police should not be trusted. I do remember that. The school board had to address it, and I do remember because I spoke to the school board, and I did publish that. Once it was out there in the public, I don't know if they are continuing to teach this garbage in the Binghamton School District. There are members of the Binghamton School District, like school districts across this nation, that are trying to do so. It's the reason why we saw in Virginia, Terry McAuliffe lost. It's the reason why we see that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States, is targeting parents at PTA meetings and at school board meetings, that they're using the full power of the United States government to terrorize American citizens, to threaten them with the FBI and investigations and ostracizing people publicly, socially, and economically for speaking out and saying their kids shouldn't be taught this, especially not in elementary school, especially not in high schools. So it's a very damaging thing. And I thank you, Bob, for reminding people that this is something that's been ongoing. We saw this in April of 2021. We've seen this before this, and we see this even now. Jason mentions your conversation about the segregation with the students in your group was eye-opening. Yeah, I think it is. And I do recommend people not to look at the 15-minute short highlights, although it conveys many of the points of the entire video, but see the 2-hour-long complete video where I break down everything that happened and why it is so destructive to our community, why it's so destructive to the young minds that are being the impressionable minds that are having this slammed into their skulls, and how it is manipulative at the fullest extent. And you may disagree. Again, I know some academics who are telling me they disagree. They don't agree. They're very angry with me because I spoke out and told what I believe is the truth, and I showed in detail how I got to that conclusion. They're very upset because they're embarrassed because they believe it without question. But I believe you should question. You must question. That's why our government was created the way it was, so that the public can question our leadership. We can question those who presume to be our betters. Bright David says, how could you really end racism? Churches they do. Example, the Catholics. No black pope in the history of Catholics. I can't speak about religion because that's an entirely separate thing. But every religion, every people have their own issues with that. And that's something that has to be dealt with on a base by base, on an individual basis. Racism, I believe, is individual. It's not institutional. And it's something that is taught and learned and is spread individually by individuals. And we can defeat that by individuals rejecting it and not falling into this false belief that if you only act more racist, well, then that counters the racism there. BLM is insanely racist. Their views are insanely racist. When you say that black people can't be charged for crimes because they're black, or when we see people saying, well, Jussie Smollett committed a hate crime, a hoax, and it's okay because he's black, there's a problem. And that doesn't get alleviated because you say, well, see, we're taking the side of black people now. No. Changing your bias and putting in one new bias for an old bias still keeps the same bias. Just exchanging biases does not negate that. You just multiply it. You create more of a problem than what you had in the first place. I hope I explained that well. I may not. I hope it's coming across clearly and it explains itself, but it may not. And if I am not, let me know. Please tell me. And I don't claim to have an answer for all of it. As Bright David mentions, there's issues with religion. I can't answer that. And I won't try because that's beyond me. But I can address what's going on with our schools. I can address what's going on with children are being taught. And I can express how bad that is and the consequences of that. But that's not to say that that's the answer to the problem or that that is the only aspect of it. But I hope I'm making that clear. And again, I'm not trying to change anyone's mind. I'm asking you to think for yourself. I'm not asking you to think like me. I'm asking you to come to your own conclusions based on the information, to truly look at it without emotion and take away the manipulation that's being put in front of you, and then really look at, is critical race theory and its applications, is intersectionality and gender identity politics, are they actually benefiting anyone except a small group of politicians who get to maintain power because of it? They don't actually fix anything. They don't actually change anything. They just have power. And that power has been working badly. That power has been hurting the world. Just look at what's going on in the Ukraine. That same group of people who are using the manipulation of your emotions they're going out and they're using that weakness to infect the rest of the world, to affect the globe. Russia is stepping up and Russia is saying, we're going to take over the Ukraine. And the United States is saying, we're going to follow the Obama administration, the 2015 international policy, which was a copy of the 1938 Neville Chamberlain appeasement, that we're going to allow the Ukraine to be absorbed by the Soviet Union. That this is what is being proposed by the Biden administration right now. That we are going to bow down to anyone who says, well, we want this, and we're willing to fight for it. And the Biden administration, with Kamala Harris, are more than willing to say, well, we won't fight. In the Ukraine right now, there's a reason why foreignaffairs.com is putting out this message, a internationally respected news organization saying, don't sell out the Ukraine. The West must respond, and the West means the United States, must respond to Russia with strength, not appeasement. Because when we did that appeasement under the Obama administration with Joe Biden as vice president, the only thing that happened is the problem extended itself. It became worse. Russia gained some land, they gained some influence, and the people of the Ukraine became oppressed. War continued in their lands. And it wasn't until we had the strength of the West, of a Donald Trump in particular, that's when Russia backed off. But now we have the weakness of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, a return to the policies of the Obama administration that enabled this in the first place. At the same time that they are weakening the American people, having them focus on the emotional manipulation of BLM, of progressive politics, of democratic socialism. And that is destroying the nation. And they know, Russia, China, Iran, they know that they can take advantage of this, and they are. Because Biden and Harris, they have no desire to be able to stand up for any values, let alone Americans. They're not willing to stand up for Americans. The people of the Ukraine are terrified right now. Russia is excited right now because they know that that the Biden administration abandoned 450 Americans in Afghanistan. I have never forgotten this, and I will not forget this, that the Biden administration stood up in front of the world on September 1st and September 5th of 2021 and told the world that the Americans, they left 85 Americans in Afghanistan, but they'll get them back home. And October 27th, they very quietly and very, very timidly told Congress, no, actually, it's 450 Americans, and it could be a couple thousand Americans in Afghanistan, abandoned by the Biden administration, that will not speak their names, will not address this issue. And when Russia and China and Iran are watching this, they're seeing this weakness, they're seeing this desire to not even protect the very Americans that our government is built to do. It is the purpose, the primary purpose of the government is to protect the people, domestic and internationally, to protect Americans. And if we are not willing to do that for our own people, do you really think the Biden administration is going to step out and protect the Ukraine or Taiwan? That they're going to try and restrict Iran? No, they won't. That's why the people of Taiwan are terrified right now. It's why the people of the Ukraine are afraid and being pressured by the United States to accept appeasement. And that appeasement reaches out to Iran as we're trying to do the Iran nuclear deal. And Iran is saying, just give us several $1 billion so we can create more global terror, because Iran is the primary source and primary supporter of global terror in the world. And they use the money from the sanctions of the United States to fund that global terror. When Obama made the Iran nuclear deal the first time, he gave hundreds of billions of dollars to Iran, and then Secretary of State John Kerry, January 2016 on CNBC, told the American people, well, yes, we're funding terrorism. The money is going to be used to increase global terror. That is true. And he was right. And it connects back to the same type of manipulation. It feeds back on the burning of America while we are inside of it. They are destroying America at its root, at its core, and at our ability to be that symbol of democracy around the world. And you can see this. This is something that's not a singular opinion. Just go out and look at the news. Progressive.org, Biden's appeasement of hawks and neocons is crippling. Biden's Iran appeasement is dangerous. Biden cannot let pursuit of Iran nuclear deal lead to a Munich event. This isn't just me saying this. There are many people who are pointing out that Biden's actions, even with China, is hurting the world. Because we are trying to spread this idea of people who are justified and not justified. That if you have the right political ideology, anything is possible. And if you don't, well, you're going to be punished. But at the same time, that ideology enables the most corrupt governments in the world to become more powerful. And that's why we see Russia, China, and Iran growing in power as we speak, using American tax dollars to make it possible. Just like we've seen in Afghanistan, and we've seen so many other places in the world. And if you think I'm really just missing this, this comes from Town Hall. The message Biden is sending is that even our foes don't need to worry about the United States coming to the aid of its friends, and as Biden is apparently doing in this case, might even be able to count on the United States to advocate on behalf of its enemies' interests. And that's what's happening with our schools. That's what's happening when we look at schools like SUNY Broome and the institutional racism that is being taught to our students. We are actually enabling the worst aspects of our nation, the very things that are corrupting our nation, that are destructive to our nation and our communities. We are building that up under this progressive mantra of fairness, of equity. We're destroying ourselves. Again, you may disagree. You may say, Mike, I don't come to that same conclusion. I do not see how these things are connected. I do not see that there is a common theme and thread throughout all of these things. You can say that, and you can tell me why you disagree. I'm perfectly happy to hear that. We are all perfectly happy to hear that. You can leave it as a text on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, DLive, any of those, or you can just call in at 607-242-1582. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. And by the way, folks, if you have not considered, if you've been here with me for over an hour now, I want you to consider subscribing. Like, share, and subscribe, because we want to hear your voice. And we are here to present you information that most media won't tell you about, won't discuss, and won't listen to your voice. So consider that. If you've made it an hour here, please like, share, and subscribe. It's important. But let's deal with the BLM aspect. Because it's not just institutional racism. It's not just that we are teaching kids to be more racist. And we're doing it under the idea that, well, this is fair for black people, because we're teaching them to be black racists instead of being white racists, which I see no difference in. Racism is racism. I don't care where it's from or who it favors. It's still bad. It's the worst thing possible. And in the 53 years of my lifetime, I've seen it get better up until about 10 years ago. And now it's gone the exact opposite way. And I listen to people telling me how, no, we need more black supremacy, because that's going to help. Because creating black racism is the answer to everything. And it's only made this nation worse. It's only separated our communities. It's one of the reasons why we see crime is up in 22 Democratic-led cities across this nation since 2020. And I mean, in some cases, astronomically more violent, astronomically more criminal than what we have seen in decades in some cases beforehand. And I want you to understand, it's going to get worse, folks. This process is going to get worse because we know BLM has said on December 9th, in a statement released Wednesday night, Dr. Melina Abdullah, director of BLM Grassroots and co-founder of BLM Los Angeles, called Smollett's trial, quote, white supremacist charade, end quote, that is forcing Smollett to face, quote, judges and juries operating in a system that is designed to oppress us while continuing to face a corrupt and violent police department which has proven time and again to have no respect for our lives, end quote. Are you serious? It was a hoax. The conspirators of that hoax have admitted it in detail. Every aspect of what Jussie Smollett has told the public has been disproven. It has been shown to be a lie, a manipulation, over and over again. Regardless of whether you're white or black, the evidence is the evidence. And I know Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told us in 2016, it's not about the truth. It's not about the factual, empirical, and grammatical truth. It's about feelings. And I tell you, that is a lie. That is a lie told to you to make you feel good about the fact that you're losing freedoms and that people are abusing you, straight up abusing you. In supporting Jussie Smollett in his hoax, in his abuse of the American people, Jussie Smollett abused America. He put out a hoax with the goal is one, to enrich himself, to better his contracts, to enriching his life. And he did this by exasperating the political division of people, blaming it on one group of people, white supremacists, Trump supporters, in his opinion, and blaming it on them to use that emotional anger that would be the result from everyone else to bolster his selfish desires. and we're supposed to support that. We're supposed to defend that. That's the position that we would hear from BLM. BLM, an organization that routinely targets and makes martyrs out of some of the worst criminals we have ever seen. That would be George Floyd, Jacob Blake, Rashard Brooks. Go down the list. Michael Townsend, horrible criminals who have destroyed communities, destroyed individuals' lives, horrible people who have abused women on a regular basis, sold poison and drugs in our communities. These individuals are supposed to be our martyrs. These are the people we're supposed to be supporting. These are the people that we don't want in prison as they abuse us and manipulate us for their own selfish ends, which is exactly what Jussie Smollett did. Yeah, he did it through entertainment. It's no different. And again, you may think, well, no, Jussie Smollett was special because he's an actor. I don't know how the laws change. I know that Alec Baldwin wants us to believe that there's a difference in being an actor than other people, that there's a different set of rules. There isn't. The law is the same. Whether it's Alec Baldwin killing someone because he mishandled a gun and that was his responsibility to make sure it was safe, or whether it's Jussie Smollett, who is abusing people's emotions to manipulate them based on their political beliefs to enrich himself. I think that's terrible. I think that's horrible. I think that's insulting and damaging to America. You may think I'm wrong. But that effort, that process doesn't end just there. Because that process, that effort, leads to what we saw last night in Binghamton, New York. What we saw last night in Binghamton, New York was the manipulation of people's emotions to try and create a crisis. And this is something that wasn't shared by the news media. By the way, if you see in this frame, and this is 1 hour, 2 minutes in, this is Bob Joseph, as I'm circling him right here. Bob Joseph is a member of the press. He is the host of Binghamton Now on WNBF Talk Radio. And he is a proponent. He has been a proponent for over 18 months now that people must wear masks, that they must wear a mask, and they must comply with every single mandate that has come down from the government. And Bob, as you can see here, will walk through. He was at this event walking through the crowds without a mask in opposition of what he has publicly told people. And he only puts on a mask, as we show in this video, when he is confronted with someone who wants to take his picture, and he then puts a mask on. And from that point on, he is wearing a mask. But before that, he had no problem. Until someone knew who he was, and until he knew he was going to be photographed. And that's part of the problem with the duplicity of our news media. That they will come out and they will tell you, this is absolutely something you must do. This is something that you must comply with. This is something that you have to do. Otherwise, you are being a danger. You are wrong. And then they turn around when you're not watching, when they don't think anyone is paying attention, and they will go out and do exactly the opposite of what they told you you must do. By the way, I know Bob. I've known Bob for 10 years. Maybe 15 years. I've known Bob for a long time. I've been on his show. I've spoken on the program many times. And I'm not attacking Bob as a horrible human being. I don't want that to be misunderstood. Just like I'm not saying that any of the professors at SUNY Broome are terrible people. I don't want people to take that opinion. But I will call them out for the things that they have done and the hypocrisy that they are promoting. If you're going to say that everyone has to wear a mask every time that they are in the public, whether they are outdoors or indoors, that mask mandates are absolutely essential, and that people who don't do that are evil or bad, do not walk out into the middle of a crowd and then be seen without the mask on, and only put it on when someone's going to take your picture. Yes, Bob, I saw all of that, and it is on the live stream. And I do call you out for that. But that same individual, and Brandon mentions rules for thee, not for me. And that's, hang on a second, folks. Thank you for calling in. This is No Soundbites Allowed. Your host,
Mike,
Voss.
how are you?
Hi.
It's John.
Hi, John.
Driving to Tucson, listening to the show right now.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad to hear that people are watching us from Arizona.
Oh yeah, driving on the road right now. Listen, I watched your live stream. I know you're talking about Bob Joseph.
Yes.
And I just want to talk about how come, with New York, which is wearing masks constantly, you're enforcing the vaccine mandates, all this stuff. How come Arizona, completely open, has lower COVID rates?
A lot of states have better rates than New York State. And it's because you can't, and I am very restricted in what I can say because YouTube, Facebook, Twitter,
I don't
they will
want
shut
YouTube
this
to
down.
shut you down, right? I don't want YouTube to shut you down, so be careful here.
But I would say that perhaps the science isn't telling us what the politicians are telling us, what the news members are telling us, because if they truly believed it, I would say, then they would act differently, like CNN's, formerly CNN's Chris Cuomo, formerly Don Lemon, and also here Bob Joseph. They'd all have different ways of reacting than what we see.
Absolutely. And it's funny to me. I'm glad you caught it on camera because it seems like all the liberal media and all these far left politicians are going to yell and yell and yell about mask mandates and all this stuff. But how come they're taking it off immediately? And as soon as cameras come around, got to put it back on because they don't want to be caught with it off. It's hypocrisy. They're going to tell us how to live. And, it's something that I see here in Arizona all the time when I see far left activists. As soon as they're seen in public, bam, they got to put the mask on.
Well, I mean, we've seen it from Kamala Harris. We've seen it with Joe Biden. We've seen it with many of the members of the press. And it's funny because I wasn't trying to photograph Bob Joseph. I wasn't trying to call him out. He walked into the scene that I was already recording live. And it just so happens that I recognized who he was and what the situation was.
It's crazy to me that you were one of the only media sources on the ground there, too. I mean, what is going on with the local media in the area that we only have one true journalist, that being you? And by the way, I don't work for you. I don't,
Right.
I'm an independent citizen. Don't mean to flatter you, but you're the only one out there. I mean, what's going on with that? I believe you stated, Bob just happened to show up. I mean, you didn't even know about the biggest rally going on in the city. Come on, that's a bunch of baloney.
I want to be very clear for people who haven't watched the live stream of the event. I did approach Bob later that night as he had a mask on at that point. But I did approach him, and the reason why I know he came upon this by accident, he told me so. He said very publicly, and I think it can be heard in the live stream because we were having a conversation while I was live streaming and he was aware of it, that he had no idea this was going on. When he saw the blockade of downtown, he parked and came out to see what it was, see what was going on, and then decided to start covering the event. So he, like the rest of the news media, didn't really want to cover this event. And I will show people how they misrepresented the information that I was showing live, and they reported it completely wrong.
Yes, couldn't agree more. And it's sad that someone from Arizona, right, knows about this protest and this event, but Bob Joseph, the only talk radio host in the area, who's on, has a broadcast, has backing, had no idea. I mean, what is going on here? It's crazy to me. Binghamton was my home. I have some stake in it. It just goes to show, one, you're the only one reporting this. And two, you're the only one calling this out for what it is. It's a plot event. Let's be 100% honest. This is a plot event. And as you saw in the video, there were a lot of plot members there organizing this, helping to organize this.
Yeah.
If they changed the name. I mean, it's like what they're doing with CRT. They can change the name of the organ. They can have 20 different names for it and sprouting up, but it's a plot event. And that plot obviously being progressive leaders of tomorrow. You know,
True.
it is what it is. But Mike, want to say you were the best journalist covering this. You know, you want to consider yourself a commentator, I know that, but at this point, you're the only one reporting the actual news. I consider you more of a journalist than commentator at this point because you're telling the truth here every single time.
Well, I try to, and I try to make sure. And there is a correction I do need to make about something that was said in the video, which I'm about to get to. But I wanted to point out that news media that did show up on the scene, they were there part of the time. They only caught part of the message in the situation, and they misrepresented, and they edited out significantly important issues at this event. And that's one of the biggest hypocrisies was, you know, Bob walking around without a mask, as he has demanded for 18 months that people must wear the mask, and if they don't, they're evil. And here he is without his mask, walking around until someone wants to take a photo of him. That I find to be a hypocrisy that must be addressed and must be pointed out.
100%. All these people are do as I say, not as I do, I've noticed. But, you know, at least you're living up to the standards. I know it was cold, Mike. I know, you know, it must have been, what, 20 degrees?
Well,
it must have
with
been
wind chill.
freezing there.
With wind chill, it was pretty low.
I mean, it's 79 here. I'm not complaining, but for man, I saw the live stream 2 hours. You were out there. You were working your butt off. I had friends calling me and asking me about the live stream, even who said, "Hey, you know, where you are?"
Oops.
Share. You're the only one who was streaming it too. I couldn't find another stream of it, and luckily, thank God, we have small town reporters like you going after the case, talking about the issues. And like I said, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is terrible what happened, but also plot is using this for other means. You know,
and that's truly the horrible part about it. That people are being manipulated in that way. Yeah,
I absolutely believe in protesting. I believe in freedom of speech, but it's horrible when you're twisting the message to be something completely else. And you watch those speeches, half the things they're saying have nothing to do with it. And when you start going after and saying, I'm going to destroy the business, we're going to go in there, that's insane. That's a crime. That's completely different.
They're planning for crimes, and they committed a crime. And that's really got to be addressed. And that's part of the problem of what happens when people get manipulated emotionally. The mob mentality that takes over. And that was horrible about what happened last night.
And, you know, I think you summed it up best when you said this crime is horrible, and I hope to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. These people need to go to jail if they committed these crimes. I want a full investigation. But let's not take away from that issue, and let's not change it into other things like creation of...
Nope, you're starting to break up a little bit.
I know, a lot of commie gobbledygook. That's all that is. But, Mike, I'm going to get going as I'm driving here. Keep up the great show. I just wanted to call in and talk about some of the things I thought you did fantastic reporting on. And how I want to thank you for being the only guy willing and brave enough to go down there yourself and stand by your beliefs and call out the establishment. That's what they are, the establishment media.
Yeah, well, I definitely thank you for that, and I do appreciate that. Even as you're several states halfway across this country, I do appreciate their time.
Fully across this country. I'm as far away as I can get from you guys.
Pretty much, yeah.
I'm watching the show, and I can't wait to hear what else you have in store for this program.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Have a good one, Mike.
You as well. And again, folks, just like you've seen now with John, you've seen with Jason, your voice is welcome on this program. And even those who disagree, even those who don't believe the same thing. And I know when I mentioned the state that that last call was from, the internet overlords went a little crazy, making it harder for people to see this program. They're not going to like what I have to say here, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't hear it. And please do pay attention, do try and listen. And if you have to come back to the program afterwards when it's not live and watch the whole thing through, because this is important. And I want to go over, and Jason mentioned something about the bars, and I want to cover, the news media didn't really tell you what happened here. Let's start off with the very first thing that we know. This is let me put this into perspective for people who have no idea what's going on. In Binghamton, approximately on November 28th, possibly at other points too, a woman has alleged that she was drugged, brought into the basement of the businesses that you can see on screen right now, and was sexually abused. A rape kit, it is stated to have been made after the event when she reported it. Police are investigating this, as was reported by the local news media, WBNG, stating that the police are investigating owners of the Colonial Restaurant as well as Dos Rios, and that there is an allegation, and this is being investigated to the full extent of law, and if there is a crime, they will be prosecuted. That is the facts as we know them, to the best knowledge we know them. On social media, there have been many allegations that have come out. There are many people who are saying that there are other crimes that have existed. There are people at this event, at the Me Too event, this event that was taken over by Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, that have made allegations totally separate of anything to do with what I just described. The events that have enraged the community, and the community is rightly enraged that any woman would be assaulted anywhere, whether at a business or at a home, it doesn't matter. Anywhere that a woman would be assaulted is an outrage and is universally denounced. And we support that 1,000%. It should be denounced. And anyone who has committed such a crime should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. We stand by that 1,000%. Whether it's one woman or many, and there are now allegations that there are multiple incidents. We know one started this process, and we now see internet rumors that there may be several women. And I would hope that if those women feel confident enough, that they are strong enough, that they would make their voices heard so that all the crimes can be properly investigated and those who are guilty can be prosecuted to the fullest extent of law. We hope that. That is what we would like to see happen. We believe that is necessary to happen, if at all possible. But again, that is an allegation. It is on social media. It is not an investigation of police at this moment. We don't know the full truth of that. So that's what we know. And we know that the news media has reported that it is now starting an investigation, that there are businesses that are involved in this, and that there are several businesses. Now, one of the things that was very important is, and there were some other news media at the event for a short period of time. I was there for over an hour and a half, and I believe I was the longest continuous coverage of this event in the social of any news media in the region. And one of the things I found to be of interest, one of the news media stations said that the protest walked to a business called Ecstasy Lounge, which was open, and they walked to it. No, they didn't just walk to it. That isn't what happened with the protest. What happened with this protest is that they entered the business, they threatened the business and the owners of that business with the full might of the crowd. And I do have, where is it? I want to show you, where is it? And I have this scene, and I want you to understand how that played out. Here it is. So the protesters entered the business. They jumped into this business, and the lights were turned off. It was hard to see. But as you can see, the protesters went in, standing on tables, shouting and saying to shut it down. This business isn't one of the ones that have been accused of committing the crimes. This is an example of mob mentality, that these individuals entered the business simply because it was open, simply because it's associated with some of those people who are being accused of the crime, and they're disrupting those people's lives and disrupting that property. Thankfully, no true destruction took place, but honestly, we were just moments away from that. None of the news media covered this. They said that this, and again, I point you to the news media, they say they walked to this business. No, they didn't walk to it. They invaded that business. And they did so at the urging of members of the urging of members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, a group that usurped this entire event. And I want to be very clear about that because I said something in covering this yesterday. I misrepresented something. I misunderstood it. The original information that was put out was that this organization, Teas and Things, as you see, had come together, 57 people, to try and put together a protest. This was on December 9th. And they stated that they would go, rain or shine, on Saturday, December 11th at 8:15 to go and target these businesses, the Colonial, Dos Rios, Stone Fox, and Ecstasy Lounge, where the Colonial and Dos Rios are the ones that are accused to have committed these crimes. And they state COVID masks and dress in black. That was our first indication that something didn't sound right. Not that this was a problem, not that there shouldn't have been a protest, but Me Too events don't go out saying dress in black. That is something that you hear from Antifa. That is something that you hear from the far left extremists. That's their type of manipulation. That's their type of an event. And so that gave us pause. We then saw that there was also additional information that on the Teas and Things page for this event, which 739 people had responded to, and roughly 400 people did show up to the event, there was this message. A message about what to do if police are arresting or abusing protesters. Except there is no evidence of that. There is no evidence that that was going to happen. In fact, the police throughout the entire event made sure that the protesters were well protected. They stopped all traffic to ensure the safety of them and had no intention and tried at no point to try and stop anyone from being able to continue their protest. But yet this message was sent out just 54 minutes before the event itself. And that's again a tactic of Antifa. That's a tactic of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. It is instilling a fear in a group of people about expressing their voices. That's manipulation. That's a manipulation of the people. And that's troublesome because, as I have since found out, Teas and Things was not created by Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, a far-left radical organization based on racist ideology in the southern tier of New York. It was actually created by an entirely separate group of individuals. And when they decided that they wanted to organize a protest, that's when Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and BLM became involved and took over the event. And they used the event to push their political ideology and to push their agenda and their issues, as they said multiple times throughout this event, using the slogans and the ideology of Antifa and BLM, the most radical aspects of BLM, to try and push their agenda and trying to push the public. They were using the emotions of the public to be able to create events like we see on the screen right now, where people were invading a business. And those same leaders of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, of BLM, of the far left, were later stating how they wish that they had destroyed the business, that they are suggesting violence in their actions, besides the violence and criminal actions that they were already committing. See, that's the problem. When we see small political groups abusing people and using them to promote their own ideology and creating a mob mentality that at a moment's notice could cause physical harm. In fact, at one point, there was someone who was watching this event. They were a woman and her young daughter that were in the crowd. And the mother is asking her child, and I think it was covered, and you could be heard in the live stream while we were at this location. And the mother's asking her daughter, "Do you feel safe? Are you okay?" Because this was at that moment feeling like it was a powder keg about to explode, and violent actions were imminent. And that was all because of the goading of members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and the far left of the Binghamton region, because they had usurped this event, because they had taken it over and twisted it to promote their ideology. At one point, the leaders of the plot and other leaders of this group were trying to turn this on we're turning it into a racial event. Oh, the woman who was attacked was black. Does it matter? Let me ask everyone who's watching this. Do you care whether a woman is black, white, Asian, Hispanic, if she has been abused and has been drugged and abused? Do you care what her gender or what her race is, her ethnicity are? You want to defend them. You want to make sure that never happens again. And it doesn't matter if they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian or any other ethnicity. It doesn't matter. That should never come up into the conversation, because it doesn't matter in the conversation. We need to defend women from anyone who would assault them, period. I don't care about your color, your sexual preference, or anything else. We need to defend people who are being sexually assaulted, both minors and grown adults, male and female, trans or otherwise. I don't care. We need to protect them, and to try and to insert a certain ideology that says, well, it's different if they're one color or one preference or one political ideology than another, is ridiculous. But again, that's used to try and take over the event, to try and promote an ideology that the event wasn't about. And the crowd responded very differently when the political ideology was about BLM and Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and trying to create a racial incident than just supporting the women who had been assaulted. And you can hear it in the live stream. People had a very different reaction, because they weren't there because of BLM. They weren't there because of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. They didn't care about them promoting totally separate issues, trying to bring in police and to accuse police of corruption. No, they were there to protect and support women. Not the same thing. But it's that manipulation that is important. And I'm going to get to the comments in just a second. But it's that same manipulation that we see at SUNY Broome. That there is only one conclusion. There is only one path that you can travel down. There is only one thing you can do, and you must do what you are told. You must submit to the will of the progressive ideology. You must believe that whites are evil and blacks are victims in every single aspect of this. You don't have a choice, and you must accept that the police are bad, and you must want to abolish the police, and you must be willing to commit crime, which is what happened later in the night after I had ended my live stream. It was reported that this group then proceeded to destroy property and to use graffiti and vandalize property, because that's what happens when you're emotionally manipulating people. They commit crimes because mob mentality takes over. And that wasn't the mentality of the individuals who were there to defend the women, and all women, as they should, to protest and say that this should never happen to any woman, to any minor, to anyone who is trans or gay or anyone whatsoever, that no one should be sexually abused. That's what the crowd was there for. That's why 400 people came together to make that known. But they weren't there to commit crimes. They weren't there to destroy property. to weaken their argument and to transform their argument into something about race or politics. That's not why they were there. And that's why it's really sad that that's what it devolved to, that certain elements, which I did not witness, so I cannot speak to that, but I would assume were some of the extreme far left individuals. I would not be surprised if it was members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, as this is a tactic that they seem to employ, that were willing to commit crimes and to be violent. And that's truly, truly troubling about this. And it's not just that the news media got this wrong at every step. Because here's some more of the reporting that came out of WBNG, where they're reporting that 100 protesters were there as of 9 p.m. I'm sorry, I can show you 9 p.m., the crowd that was at this event. Just look at the number of people that are here. I can show you that this crowd goes on and on and on. There were approximately 400 people there at 9 p.m. But that minimizes the impact. It minimizes what the public is seeing, because if you weren't watching the live stream and you saw your local mainstream news, you would see the misinformation. You would think, oh, only 100 people showed up. It must not have been that big. It must not have been that serious. And I do want to mention that, yes, the only news media that mentioned it, Bob Joseph, did get it correct when he showed the evidence that crimes were being committed, although he wasn't present and didn't cover the fact that they were going on into these businesses and they were threatening and they were at the moment of committing even more crimes. And I think that's important. You may think I'm wrong. Now, some of the comments, Mike Bowie had mentioned that it's uncomfortably close to a looter's mentality. And I will tell you, being present in the crowd, watching this occur, listening to the encouragement of the crowd to become more and more violent, yes, it was very close to a looter's mentality. And if you think I am wrong, you can watch the entire video for yourself, the entire hour and 43 minutes, and make the determination for yourself if there was encouragement or not. That's up to you. I covered the event live, and you can see for yourself and you can hear for yourself what was being said. Jason mentions, look what they created with the strip search allegations, which was a lie. The same group, the same individuals who seek to manipulate this crowd to usurp the message of Me Too, to use it to twist into their message of BLM and Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow and racial division. Those same individuals misled the public and the nation and internationally misreported information about the rape of students, the abuse of strip searching of children that never occurred. And we were the only news station that covered the fact that the courts determined that it was completely false. It was a hoax. It was a lie. And that's what the court had to say. We covered that. It's truly upsetting because we saw an event that was very important. It is very important for our community to say, women are safe. And I stand by that, and I believe in that, and I support that message. Women are safe. They must be protected. They must be safe, and no predators should be allowed. And they should be investigated to the fullest extent of the law. But a mob does not get to make justice for themselves. They don't get to go around and on their whims and on the prodding of elites with a political agenda, do not get to act on their own. That's wrong. That's just as much of a crime. That is just as much of a problem. God forbid, imagine if one of the individuals alleged to have committed a crime, what if one of them is innocent? What if one of the people that are being attacked that they didn't. Not to say that the incident didn't happen, not to say that women were abused, but what if one of the people that are being targeted by this mob didn't do it? What if they were innocent? And this mob was being goaded into violence against these individuals. What if they picked the wrong person? See, that's the problem with mobs. That's the problem because mobs are created not from anything more than good people came out. 400 people came out to say women deserve and should always be safe. That predators against women will not be accepted in the southern tier of New York, nor anywhere else in America, nor anywhere else in the world if it is possible. And I support that message. But it takes very little for people who are very careful in using their words to entice, to use this group of people and that energy, that anger, and to twist it and to make it into a mob that is just as violent and dangerous. And I'm sure that's an unpopular thought. And I'm sure there are people who will say, Mike, I'm very angry with you for saying that. And you shouldn't mention it, even if it's true. Even if they acknowledge that that was happening, they don't want to hear it because, well, it takes away. No, I don't think it does. You may think I'm wrong. And again, you can comment on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. You can call into the show at 607-242-1582. And you can say, Mike, you're wrong. But I want you to be very clear. It is perfectly fine and it is a good thing to laud that there was a protest and the protest is standing by women and saying that this is unacceptable and that this must be investigated. And those who are guilty, if they are guilty, must be brought to the fullest extent of law, punished. That is a fantastic thing. And we can at the same time look at what was being done about this, how this was being used and twisted and turned away from that purpose, and how those people were being used, how the women who showed up last night were being used no differently than the people who committed the sexual assault. They were using them to promote a political ideology that was not part of the event nor the reason why people were present. And I swear, if it weren't for the fact that they were asking people to appear dressed all in black, to take on the feeling of Antifa, to make Antifa feel like or to seem like they are bigger and stronger and more involved in the community than they actually are, if it weren't for them usurping the Me Too movement and the Me Too message that the community believed in, I think you would have seen more people out there. More people from the community would have been involved. But I think many people recognize that. Of the 739 people that had responded to this event, I think more of them would have come out. And they would have supported it if it were not for the fact that they were also seeing the elements of Antifa and progressive leaders of tomorrow that were being injected into this. And once they saw live that it was BLM who set up a tent, that progressive leaders tomorrow had sent up a tent and was promoting itself at this event, that turned people away. And rightfully so. Michael Bowie mentions, never let a good crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel. These people are parasites. And I think it is somewhat parasitic to see that Plot was using this event to try and promote their anti-police rhetoric, to use this to protest the various issues that they have. I think it was inappropriate. I think it was wrong. And I think it was malicious. I think it's using the women just as badly as those who have alleged to have committed this crime. And I think it should be called out. Someone may disagree. Matt mentions people need facts before acting, and people don't care about facts anymore, and that terrifies me. That someone merely by the label on social media is enough for people to inflict harm. It's one thing to say, I'm going to protest a business because I don't care. You want to protest a business because you like Rocky Road ice cream instead of vanilla or butter pecan? Fantastic, have at it. You want to have a protest and say that butter pecan is the best ice cream ever? Go for it. That's America. That is your right. It is your First Amendment right to have that expression and to say that. It isn't your right to say, and let's destroy anybody else and their businesses because they may not agree with my opinion, because I feel like they are wrong. And we need to emphasize that just as much as we are there to laud the very good thing of people protesting violence against women. I think you can do both things at the same time. I'm sure there will be people who will misquote me and misrepresent this, but I want this to be very clear because I'm saying it in front of everyone. And if you disagree, I'm more than happy to hear your voice because it's not based on race. It's not a racial thing. It has nothing to do with race. I think that dilutes and weakens the subject. This isn't about police, and it's not about police abuse, which is unfounded and unrecognized. The FBI is not investigating the Binghamton police to the best knowledge of that I have and all news media sources that I am connected to. This isn't about ACAB or any of that. This was about protecting women. Anything else was taking away from that. There were several powerful moments in this event. And then there were several moments in this event that completely wasted that power, that completely diluted that and abused it. And that's my opinion. And I don't think we should encourage any group of any political faction on any issue to encourage violence and criminality, because that hurts the community as a whole. It makes people less willing to speak out. It makes people less willing to support the good causes, and it devolves our society into chaos and anarchy. And no one wins from that. And you may disagree. You may say, Mike, I'm completely against what you're saying. Okay, why? Why am I wrong? Why is that conclusion incorrect? After watching the entire live stream, 1 hour and 43 minutes, watching the full event, comparing it to the news reporting that was out there and to seeing the deficiencies of what is being told to the public and seeing what actually happened, tell me, why am I wrong? Because I am more than happy to hear that. And if I am wrong, I will apologize. And just like I made the correction, I said in the video that I believe that this was organized by a plot based on the information that I have shown to you, which indicates Antifa and plot involvement, and I was incorrect. Tease with things is separate of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. They have different goals, they have different objectives, they have different purpose. But plot did usurp the event, and that had an impact. And Jason mentions this group taints the Me Too. We just had the Jussie Smollett. Yes. Matt mentions, let the facts be found out before acting. And yes, social media is the major issue today. The college-age generation today believe what is on social media and not thinking and finding facts and sources. And I agree with that. That's why I'm providing the facts and the sources so that you can see this for yourself. It's why I did the coverage in the live stream. I wasn't taking an opinion. I was there to show you what was happening and to show you how people were. And I had no idea that the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow would abuse the crowd and use them to commit acts of crimes. And I have to denounce that. As I laud the 400 people, many of them college students, many of them mothers and kids, that came out to say that this was unacceptable. You can do both things at once. And yes, I do encourage, like you say, Matt, that social media isn't truth. First of all, we should never believe. Social media was never meant to be news media, although news can be conveyed there. Just like this program is political commentary. And we do cover news events. but we never tell you to take this as the only source. We provide you with many sources as we have today, as you will see in the description after the show, so that you can find out more for yourself and that you can make your own decision. Because news media is best when it is left for you to make the conclusions that you wish. We are presenting our conclusions on the information that we see. And we are sharing that information with you so that you can come to your conclusion. It may be different than ours. We respect that. But we will not shy away from the things that we see and the conclusions that we come to. That's when social media is being best used. It's not about a matter of misinformation. It's a matter of providing information and allowing people to do what they can do, because human beings are intelligent. Individuals are intelligent. Mobs are stupid. Always. Mobs are no more than a bunch of cows being herded into a direction. Individuals are intelligent. There is a difference, and we can say that, and we highlight that. And it's one of the reasons why we do this program every week, every Sunday at 2:30 p.m., to let people know about information maybe they have not heard about, to consider the consequences of the laws that are being presented and being pushed on them, about what freedoms are being lost and how that is affecting our lives. You may not agree with every conclusion we come to, and that's perfectly fine. And that's why we look forward to hearing the comments from everybody on the program, from YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and DLive, when the social media internet overlords allow, to hear your comments, to hear what you think about these things that we are seeing. It's why we go out and we do events like we have, why we went to SUNY Broome College and we covered their institutional racism event. It's why we went to the protest, the Me Too event, to let you see what's going on. And then to understand afterwards, what did we just experience? What was happening there? And as human beings, we all have different opinions to some extent, and we'll agree and disagree on different points. But I think it's important to have these conversations and to also hear out the differences in people who disagree. Maybe the members of Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow thought that they were doing the very best thing they could, that it was the best moment, that, like Rahm Emanuel says, there is no time to waste in a crisis, to use every crisis to their advantage, that it was important for them to try and usurp this event to promote their issues so that they could advance their goals. And I'm sure that's part, at least, of what they had thought. I don't share that that was a good thing. I think it took away from the main point of the event and the very serious issue that it was there to protest. But maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think I'm wrong. Maybe you think, Mike, you just missed the point. Okay, enlighten me. I'm an intelligent man. I can hear an argument. I can admit when I'm wrong, when I am presented with evidence and an argument that makes more sense than what I believe beforehand. Enlighten me if I'm wrong. Enlighten those who are watching this around the nation and around the world. Because I guarantee you, people are watching this, and around the world, they are taking the cue. And they are saying, well, if this happens in America, then it must be normal when it happens in my country. That isn't the case. Mike mentions, after watching your critical race theory video, I have to wonder if college students are being encouraged to protest to become activists. And my answer to you would be yes. Yes. And I believe that, and I want to be very clear about this, I do not believe it was the intention of the presenters at SUNY Broome that they were trying to convert to convert the students into the progressive ideology. I don't think that was their goal, but that was the result. I don't believe it was their goal to encourage institutional racism, but that was the result. Much in the same way that I'm not saying that the Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow purposefully intended well, actually, no, I am saying that they did purposefully use the emotion that was there to try and twist it towards their goals. But there's the difference. At the institution, at SUNY Broome, it was unintentional. The fact that they did not give anyone any other voice to hear, that they did not present any other information counter to their end result, that everything about this event was predetermined to end with the statement, whites are racist, blacks are victims, and you must agree because there is no other answer. I don't think that was their intention. I think they were just blinded by their belief that they were doing the best thing possible, and this was good. This was the greater good. It's not what the end result was. So I think that's different. So, Mike, I want to address, I hope that addresses, yeah, they are encouraging the protest. They are encouraging them to be activists. It's an unintended consequence of what they did and the fact that they gave them no other option. There was no other outlet. All information led to the same answer. And that troubles me. Just like when you have an event with Me Too and you channel everyone into the progressive leaders of tomorrow, the BLM Antifa movement and mindset, the only result is, well, we wind up with violence as we saw and criminality as we saw, which is not what that was about. And that needs to be called out. Matt mentions that the protest should not be tied to politics, which I agree with. It has nothing to do with politics, which I agree with. The idea of the protest was to protest against the owners, which I don't agree with until you get the facts. And and at the same time, Matt, the last thing, is it possible for people to protest against something that is ultimately wrong? Yeah. I think that the greater effort of the protest, and I may be wrong, but I believe the goal was to emphasize, and I've mentioned it several times here today, that it was to support women, to say that anyone abusing women are wrong, and that is unacceptable in our community as well as our nation, and hopefully around the world. And I believe that was the goal. That was the intention of those who created this group, Tease with Things. Their intention was to say, this is unacceptable. I agree with that. As part of that, there are those who would then say, and if these men, if they were to say, if they had said, if these men did this, they must be punished to the fullest extent of the law, I would absolutely have agreed with that. And if they were highlighting that and saying, and if this business is responsible for what has been alleged, hold it responsible. Do not give your money to it. Hold them. I would agree with that. But I think you're right. We moved past that. It was a slippery slope. It became a mob event saying, punish these businesses, punish these individuals, punish other businesses and other individuals that had nothing to do with this merely because we say so, because we're directing your anger to them, because you're being used. And that is sad. And I think that needs to be mentioned, which is why I'm bringing it up today. And again, if anyone disagrees with me, I am more than happy to hear their voice. If you think that isn't what the outcome was, if that wasn't the purpose, if that isn't what was the result, please tell me why you think so. If you think what happened at SUNY Broome wasn't about railroading people into a specific ideology, tell me why. I'm more than happy to hear that. But that's not what I see. When I look at the evidence, when I look at the fact of what happened and my experience in covering it, that's not the conclusion I come to. And that's why it's important for us to have this discussion. Whether everyone sees it or very few people see it, whether the internet overlords try and block you from this, it's information you should have. And then make your own conclusions based on it, whatever that conclusion may be. Whether that's to agree with me, disagree with me, agree in part, it doesn't matter. That's your choice. And I think that's important. America is about choice. It is critical. It is embedded in our nation. And when we lose the ability to make choices, and when we are just led by the nose towards a conclusion, well, that's when we start getting events like the Ukraine. That's when we start getting our leaders making the worst possible decisions without any understanding of the consequences of what they're doing. When we start seeing people losing their rights and we see them losing their ability to control our government, and it leads us down a path of destruction. That's my opinion. And I'm more than willing to say it publicly. And you may disagree, and that's okay. You don't have to agree with me. But I ask you why. If you don't agree, if you don't see this, why? Matt mentions, you're right, let the people protest with their money and let the police do their job to figure out what happened and if it was true. And I think that's absolutely perfectly right. I think that's absolutely perfectly fine. And I think it's, in some cases, essential. But not to destroy property, not to commit crimes, not to threaten and promise to commit physical violence, as happened and was recorded at the event, which no one else in the news media wanted to talk about. No one else in the news media has reported this to the public, and I did, and you can see and hear it for yourself, that there were promises of future violence, of future actions, of future mob activity and criminality, and that needs to be denounced, and that is as important as everything else in reporting on this event. Women should be safe. Those who are predators against women should be punished. Those who promise to commit crimes and are suggesting that criminality is the solution and mob mentality is the solution should be denounced. These things can all happen at the same time, and they can all be true. But our news media seems to be afraid to say that. They're afraid to take on progressive leaders of tomorrow. They're afraid to address the far left and the Antifa fanatics. They're afraid to address anyone who's a person of color and believes in a far left ideology. The academics are afraid to present any kind of open thought or to challenge someone with information from both sides of an opinion and of an issue. Instead, they want you to march down a path that has already been predetermined, with predetermined answers, predetermined winners, and predetermined individuals who take political power from this. And in the end, if that is the path you take with them, you lose. You lose your freedom, you lose your rights, you lose your independent power. And I don't think that's right. And you may say, Mike, well, you just don't understand. Okay, enlighten me. By the way, and this is open for anyone around the world. These are conversations that are happening around the globe. People in the United Kingdom, and I know for a fact that people from a dozen countries watch this program. And I know that people are watching what happened at the protests, and not all of them are seeing exactly what are the smaller little things that are happening there. But they're important. There are people who are watching, who watched the Me Too event, and they don't realize that a protest doesn't necessarily involve invading a business or threatening the owners or promising violence or committing violence. That's not a protest. The moment that violence is threatened, and especially when it is done, when criminal action has taken place, it's no longer a protest. That's a mob, and that's a crime, and it should be punished. And I don't care what is the cause that created that group of people. Once you've crossed that line, you've crossed the line. And it's a shame, because that was a line, and those are lines that never had to be crossed because in discussing the Me Too movement, in discussing and protecting women, that never had to happen. Never. It was unnecessary. But yet it happened anyway.
You can go back to the hospital.
And that's troubling to me. But that's some of the thoughts that I had about this event. And let me ask you, did you see the live stream? Did you see the live stream of this event? You know, did you see the live stream? Did you see the media coverage? Did you see, was the media coverage accurate? Besides the fact that things like I showed you, where we see that WNBF, Bob Joseph, is hypocritical in some of his views, that his views of 18 months in talking to the public don't confirm and do not show, don't line up with what he did in public, that the news media misrepresented the size of the crowd, that the news media forgot to mention how the mob invaded a business, threatened violence, and then ultimately did commit violence, commit crimes. Do you think the media conveyed the fact, or even acknowledged the fact, that the people leading this event were members of Plot, a group that has been known to be violent in our community and to promote violence in their issues and to misrepresent facts to the public? I think that's important to know. Because I believe women in our community deserve better than that. They deserved better treatment than that. They deserved the event to be handled better than that. That they were being used because of it. Mike mentions, I don't believe the crime warranted shutting down Court Street or invading a business. They were infringing on the rights of innocent people. Well, that's something that progressive leaders of tomorrow do on a regular basis. They believe in that completely. Now, if we look at all of the events, and I've covered many of the events of progressive leaders of tomorrow, otherwise known as Plot, in the southern tier of New York on a regular basis. I've covered many of their events, and they routinely do this. They routinely believe in infringing on the rights of other individuals to intimidate them, to cause fear, and to try and make it seem like they have control. It's about power. It's about power for that organization, which is one of the reasons why they don't like me, which is one of the reasons that when they see me at an event, they try to block my coverage to deny you the ability to see exactly what they are doing and exactly how they are doing it. Because if they had nothing to fear, if there was no other way to interpret their information, they'd never try and stop you from seeing it. That's my belief. Hi, Hot Chicks. Good to see you. I hope you've been enjoying the program. Right now, we're talking about the event last night, the Me Too, and how it was abused by progressive leaders of tomorrow. And I think that's, and how troubling that is, and how it's the same thing as what we saw at SUNY Broome earlier this week, when SUNY Broome decided to go out and to corrupt the minds of students, in my opinion. Matt mentions, the thing I love is they do it without permits and so on to close off any city street you need to apply and pay for permits and have insurance. Yes, this was an illegal event. They illegally caused disruption of many businesses and disrupted many people's lives. Now, I'm not entirely against that. In some aspects, I can understand and appreciate that The views and feelings of the public sometimes cannot be contained, nor should they be. At the same time, it shouldn't be a pattern that every time progressive leaders of tomorrow appear, every time that they go out to make a protest, they always infringe on the rights and freedoms of other individuals, disturb businesses, and intimidate the public whenever possible. That's a troubling pattern. That's not right. And I've done enough live streams covering their events to show you consistently that they do that every single time. Again, this event was usurped. It wasn't that there weren't enough people to make this newsworthy. Over 400 people had come together. And with 400 people, they probably would have covered the streets anyway. It was more people than can be contained on a sidewalk. I get that. Did they need to try and infiltrate a business, to invade that business, to threaten individuals in that business and the business's operation? Did they need to vandalize property and to destroy property? No. Yes, Matt, it was just like the one they did at City Hall in the Binghamton region and several others. And again, I've covered those events. I've done live streams of several of their events. So it's not surprising or new. We've covered a lot of ground here today. Wow. 2.5 hours. And I love speaking with everybody here. But again, I will say, we're not done yet. And you can call into 607-242-1582 to say whatever you want. If you disagree with me, if you think I'm wrong, if you think my conclusions are incorrect, that I have misunderstood this, please share your voice. I ask you to share your voice, to share it with all of us who are watching this, both live and afterwards, to say why you think this is incorrect. Don't just waste time and say, oh, Mike, you're evil, you're racist, you're an istophobe. I don't care about that stuff. That's meaningless. Don't personally attack me. Convince me. Explain to me why I have misunderstood. I'm an intelligent man. Give me your argument and explain with your sources why you believe that is correct. Don't tell me that it's your feeling. I don't care. Don't tell me that you think I'm an evil, racist, sexist, whatever. I don't care. That's not important to me. Tell me what your reasoning is. Tell me how I have misunderstood the information that is provided and it is available. Convince me. Don't try and manipulate my emotions. Don't try to make me fear being ostracized, nor should anyone else who watches this program or who hears this information. Don't fear being ostracized. Don't fear being called an outcast, because you're probably not. The overwhelming majority of Democrats don't agree with the far left. The overwhelming majority of Americans don't agree with the far left. It's one of the arguments I had with the academics at SUNY Broome who wanted to tell me, well, everyone they know agrees with it, that everyone they speak to in the academic circles think it's perfectly fine to misrepresent the entire black middle class since 1860. And it would actually be 1865 if we're to be accurate. Even as they're highlighting the problems with Chicago. As they're mentioning how this is the failure of Chicago. Well, let's be clear. No, it went back. I'll bring that back in a second. The problem is Chicago, as the example was being made at SUNY States, possibly this. And here it is. I want to bring that up for you. They're pointing out how their policies have failed in Chicago, one of the most progressive cities in the nation, where Democrats have had control for over 75 years. That every member of elected office are Democrats that have been pushing their solutions for 75 years, and they have completely and absolutely failed. But yet it is this same insular group of academics that tell me, well, no, you just don't understand. We just need more of what we've been doing for the last 75 years on a message that no one agrees with. That doesn't work. But you just need to do more of it. Just keep going down that path and give up some of your freedoms, give up some of your rights, and just become a mindless drone. Become a member of a mob that is being manipulated by a small group of individuals for their political advantage. I don't know. I don't think that's right. Hot Chicks mentions vandalism is counterintuitive. It's counterproductive. I think the fact that they were committing acts of vandalism and threatening to commit acts of violence works against the entire Me Too movement. It works against everyone who would normally support this organization. And I think that people who are watching this event ahead of time, who were seeing, as I showed you, who were reading the flyer and seeing how it's asking for COVID masks and black dress, that they were hinting at this being an Antifa event, that kept many of the 739 people who had stated that they had been informed about this event, they didn't want to be involved. I think it's because that they were inferring that they would be using tactics like Antifa always does, like progressive leaders of tomorrow always do, that there would be disruption and conflict with police that did not happen, that wasn't even close to happening, that had no relation to reality, nor has it had any relation to reality in any event that Plot has ever done. Every single protest that has been done by Plot, and I have covered many of those protests live, there has never been interference by police officers once. In fact, the police have ensured the safety of the protesters by stopping all traffic and allowing the public to continue to protest. That is the only thing. And yet we see members of Plot continuing to try and seed the public with this idea that they're a danger. Hello, and thank you for calling No Soundbites Allowed. This is your host, Michael Voss. May I ask who's speaking?
Hey, Mike, this is Mark.
Hi, Mark.
I was just calling. I appreciate that you went out there last night and covered the protest. There wasn't very much media coverage, and I was just wondering what you think the reason is for that.
There's a couple of reasons why there wasn't a lot of media. One, a lot of people weren't aware. I myself wasn't aware of the event until 2 hours beforehand when someone, an audience member, contacted me and said, hey, did you know this was happening? Here's a copy of the flyer. Here's the page that it's happening on Facebook going out, which is why I didn't have time to tell people that I was going to be at the event and that I would be covering it. And so less people were able to see it live, sadly. So part of it is we only knew from December 9th that this was going to exist on December 11th. In addition to that, a lot of the news media don't want to record and report what's happening, which is why they don't stay. So several members of the press did show up and left as soon as possible because they don't want people to see, hey, this thing has been turned violent, that the people are being used to promote a very specific political agenda, that they're committing crimes. They don't want you to know that because they want you to stick with the message, oh, see, this was such a great Me Too movement, except it really wasn't. It was smeared by the existence and interference from progressive leaders of tomorrow. And the less they show of that, the less likely you are to notice it, in my opinion. So that's kind of why I think that, and why they misrepresented. There's a crowd of 400. It's reported as 100. They're reporting it they say they went to a business instead of they invaded the actual business, as I recorded and showed. So there's those differences. That makes sense?
Yeah, it feels like it's being minimalized for the coverage that they did have. It feels like, like I saw the news broadcast and it said 100 people were out there, and then I watched your stream, and right when it started, there was almost 100 people out there, let alone there's probably 300 or 400 out there. And So you feel that they're minimalizing it because of the that the crowd could have turned violent. That's why that they didn't want to show that the event was being hijacked by a progressive movement.
Yes, I think that's part of it. Yes, and
I was wondering if it's just because of the area and them kind of wanting to let this thing go away because it's bad for business, quote unquote.
I'm sure for some of, I'm sure there is that element too. I mean, it is downtown Binghamton. It does kill tourism. It does kill people supporting businesses, not just these businesses, but many businesses in Binghamton itself. So it is detrimental on that side. I don't think that's the main cause though, because they've covered other events and they've covered them more fully, except when it's with progressive leaders of tomorrow. When they see that leadership, they see that direction, because that tends to be very negative and something that's not supported by the community or the public. So there's many things that are happening all at the same time. And I don't think it's just one thing. It's the combination of all of them put together that results in the kind of coverage we get that is less than positive. It's not misinforming the public. It's kind of disinforming the public. It's a lack of, it's kind of like what I said, what SUNY Broom did. You're not being given any information that would lead you to a different conclusion than the one they want you to have. They're cutting out everything that you might objectively object to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Do you know that, like, from what I've heard, there's been reports, at least social media reports, of even victims that have been interviewed being told by law enforcement to not speak, not to reach out to mainstream media as far as national coverage goes. Have you heard reports like that, or have you seen examples where they just don't want this to be a national media coverage? Because I would think that would be a good thing to have that. And do you think it warrants national media coverage, or do you think it should stay local?
Not one person in the news media that I am aware of, that I have contact, and I do have contacts in the major news media in this region. I know many of them. I've worked with some of them at various events. I've been interviewed by several of them. So I know many of the news media organizations, traditional news media organizations in the area. Not one that I am aware of has ever hinted that they are trying to hold back this story, that they are not trying to report it to some degree, or that they are not presenting it to the higher-ups for it to be a national issue. This doesn't qualify, quite honestly, as a national issue because there's no confirmation. 2, there's no violence. 3, it's being supported by a radical group that most people in the country do not support. When Plot took over this event, they literally cut down on the newsworthiness of it because it's then it's being promoted by a political organization, an ideology that have nothing to do with the root purpose of people being out there at the event. So it's inherent in how they're being presented is how it's getting cut down. So those are the reasons why it's not national news, in my opinion. That could change.
Because the allegations, as far as on social media, now, like you said, we don't have all the facts, but the allegations on social media that it's not just one woman, it's multiple women have had this happen to them, and that it's not just like an isolated incident either, that it's somewhat coordinated and been in effect for quite a while. And so I think that's the difference, where it's multiple businesses that are part of a group that are involved or somewhat responsible and liable. And so I think that kind of warrants bigger coverage of it. But my other question for you
Sure.
is I know you probably have ties with the university there, and I know Binghamton's a big university town. a lot of their income comes from that university.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if the universities like put out any like public safety meetings over this, or any maybe information to their students to warn them of these allegations, and to just kind of reinforce, using the buddy system when going out and being safe and protecting each other and all that?
To my knowledge, at this point, no. Neither Binghamton University nor SUNY Broome, there's two colleges in the southern tier, and they're both larger institutions, but SUNY Broome, which is a state college, and actually both of them are, and Binghamton University. At this moment, I am not aware of either of them instituting anything of that nature. Will they? Since this event happened, I would think they're going to be leaning towards that, and we may see that next week. As the public is becoming more aware of more details, and as the rumor mill on social media expands this and starts including tales and stories that are, I don't want to say they're not credible, I don't want to say that, but they are also less to do with this issue and on totally other subjects, bringing race issues with the police has nothing to do with this. And yet that was being brought in. The wanting to defund the police has nothing to do with this, yet that was brought in. Other issues and other subjects were being brought into this. So as that expands, if it expands, I would think that yes, they will. It is always advisable for women to let their friends know what's going on, to be careful with your drinks in any environment, in any location, because there are disreputable people that exist. It's not because all men are rapists. It's not because all men are savage brutes. But there are bad people in the world, and those bad people do bad things, and they take advantage of situations where they know that, as an example, college students drink, and they usually drink to excess. It makes them a target. Same thing as if you're walking around and you're in a big city and you're gawking at every single skyscraper, looking up everywhere you're going instead of watching where you're going. And in a big city, that identifies you as a target for muggers. And that's how people get pickpocketed and mugged, because you're identifying, you're giving that opportunity to those bad people, if that makes sense. So I hope that, yes, we can take this as, and I think that would have been a better message at the event yesterday, to say, women, be prepared, take precautions, have mace, learn about self-defense. I personally believe women should be armed. They should be trained. We should have more firearms, that women should be able to have access to handguns and be properly trained on their use to better enable them to defend themselves in situations where that could be appropriate. So I think that's important, and not the other way around of saying, oh, we have to ban all guns. No, I think train women to be able to use guns, to equalize that situation too. And also, in terms of open carry, to let other people know, if you're trying to be a bad person, especially to a woman, because she happens to be 5 foot tall and weighs 95 pounds, she has something to equalize the situation. You're not going to get away with trying to abuse her. And thus, it deters that. So that's what I think should happen with this. Is that going to happen?
I think it's
Probably
unfortunate that we live in a culture that requires that. I mean, but I agree with you. I think in our current culture, the equalizer and, arming yourself and being responsible for yourself and being able to protect yourself is necessary in our culture. It is unfortunate, though, that we have to do that.
Well, to an extent, I suppose these things have always existed in mankind, but realistically, lately, they've taken a different type of turn. And I think it's because we're enabling it through our education system, through things like critical race theory, identity, gender politics, and intersectionality. We're emphasizing some of the most negative aspects of our society. And in fact, we're encouraging some of these most negative aspects, which is why we see them more and more. And that's kind of upsetting. And I do recommend to people, it's perfectly fine to be outraged. It's another thing to act on that outrage without confirmation. It would be wrong in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse or any of the riots over 2020. It's wrong in this case too. And I hope people don't act without confirmation because that never works out well for anyone. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Another question I had for you was, like, I understand that you're, obviously not for defund the police or anything like that, but
No.
do you feel that there is a level of corruption or a level of collusion possibly with this story, or do you think that's completely unfounded and that there isn't a certain level of collusion or cooperation or corruption involving these businesses? Because generally these businesses are, especially in a smaller city or town, they're generally tied. You have business dealings where it's kind of the heads, well, they bring business here, so they turn their heads the other way. Do you feel like that's something that's prevalent in the Binghamton area, or do you feel like that's completely obscene or not even close?
Well, no, that's an excellent question. And in part because it is a small community. I mean, Binghamton's 40,000 people and another 10,000 for students. So it's a very small community. I know a lot of people think of that as a city. It's a small community, at least to me. So you have many business owners own multiple businesses, own multiple properties. They speak with each other. They speak with the local government on a regular basis. You have much closer ties. That doesn't mean everybody's involved, nor does it mean that everyone's trying to stop it. Is there going to be some aspect of that? I'm sure. I'm sure to some degree that the news media could have looked into this a little bit harder. That elected officials could have been at the event last night. They could have been marching to say that they agree that women should never be assaulted. They didn't. But that's the problem with small towns. That's always that. Now, do I think that it was intentional to prevent that? Because there's a difference of incidental, that, of course, small town, small businesses, very few business owners, they all know each other, they know government because they interact with them, and purposefully trying to protect someone and to deny this from being investigated, that's a different thing. I don't think, at least with the evidence we have so far, that that's correct. But that's why we need the investigation. And if it is found through the investigation that there was a corroboro by anyone to any degree, no matter what level of government or business that they are, then I absolutely demand that those individuals be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But I'm not going to jump to that conclusion. I don't have any evidence, nor have I heard of any evidence from anybody that confirms that. I know there are allegations being made by the far left to that end, but there's no corroboration that I've seen so far. So I look at that as an open question. Could it happen? Sure. We see it in Chicago. We see it in many major cities. Corruption exists. It could always be there. Is that the case in this right now? I don't see it because there's no evidence of it. But that doesn't mean I'm going to say it can't happen. Do you see what I mean by that? And how I hope I'm coming across clearly about that.
Yeah, it's very concerning also to me that, I mean, it's the economic depressed area, correct? I mean, it's currently still
It's New York State, yeah.
depressed area.
It's New York State,
Yeah,
of course
so
it is.
With that, with that situation, people's livelihoods are really important with them. And it's not like something that's been like a few years either. It's been a lot of years in that area that they've been depressed as far as economically. I mean, a lot of big business left. IBM, when they left, probably cost them, quite a bit. And so there's a certain economic dependency on these businesses and the university. And the last thing you want getting out, that your college town has a bunch of women that are being essayed, that's not good for your college, and that's not good for, trying to get your students and your income there and all that. So that's what some of my concerns is.
But the problem is, well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to make clear, this isn't new. This is a problem that's been existing and exists in every college town to some extent, but has existed to some extent. We've had college students that sadly have been killed because of deranged individuals. We've had students in public who have been hit by people drunk driving. We've had various incidents throughout the years. And that's not unlike any college town in America or around the world. And in fact, for comparatively, probably less. But we've also seen politicians do things to ignore this issue. We've seen members of the Binghamton City Council deny the introduction of what were called blue lights. It was an initiative to have literally blue lights installed so that throughout downtown, so that if students and or women or others were confronted by someone who's trying to be criminal, they could activate this blue light. It would give a signal and also be tied to the police to try and encourage them to come to that area and try and help those individuals. And that was denied because the far left in the region said, well, that's racist profiling. I don't understand how, but that's what they said. So while we have some problems, like any city would, some of the solutions are being prevented because of progressive ideology, and some of them are problems that no one has ever come up with an answer for. There has always been deranged individuals that commit killings and murder. There have always been individuals who commit sexual assault. None of them are acceptable. Minimizing that is always a priority. Sadly, no one has come up with a perfect answer to do that. But we should keep trying.
I mean, I agree with those examples, but at the same time, I feel like this story in itself is it's more predatory, and it's more of a situation where you're supposed to be able to go into establishment and feel safe, and yet that establishment itself, allegedly is taking advantage. And I think that's like a pretty big difference between, well, we have crime in our city and these certain incidents occur on the regular basis. This just seems like is more predatory, and if the allegations are true, it involved a lot more victims.
Well, I'm not trying to minimize it. I don't want that. I don't want what I'm saying to be taken as being minimization. I think it's a serious issue, and I think this is a serious case. But I am also trying to understand that, because some people are trying to make it seem like, well, if we just do this, this will never happen again. That's ridiculous. So we have to look at the broad spectrum. I'm looking at the consequences down the road. We can't just stop at that one or two or three guys or people who are involved in this. They're the problem. Getting rid of them, that solves the problem, which is generally the way the media presents it and the way many politicians present it, because it gets them off the hook and no one's going to pay attention for the next 2, 3, 5 years, whatever. What I'm saying is we have to look at this as a more comprehensive thing. We have to look at all of the aspects and say, besides dealing with this immediate problem, how do we help minimize this going forward? Because I don't think it's something we can always guarantee. You cannot stop crime, period. But we can minimize it. And the more things we can do to make the public capable, individuals capable of defending themselves and making criminals aware that the public is able to defend themselves, I think that helps to reduce this in the future. So as an example, saying I would love to see the Binghamton and SUNY Broome start a program of not only self-defense, hand-to-hand self-defense for women, but also encourage women to go and to learn about firearms and firearm safety, and to possibly become to go through training on using a firearm, make that public. Whether or not women actually are armed is separate. Of make that public, make it very well known and encourage that this program exists and that it's being used. And that helps to reduce the impetus of those people who want to break the law, who want to be criminal, who want to be predatory. Put them on the defensive. And don't limit it to, well, it's just those 1, 2, 3 guys or whatever group it is. Let's look at this as a broad, here's the solution for today and tomorrow, or at least it's a deterrent today and tomorrow. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. And I just want to, thank you again for going out there and getting that coverage, because if it wasn't for you going out there, we wouldn't have it. And to me, that's something that's very exciting that's happening in social media right now, where people are going out and, literally just covering what's happening so people can really get a clear idea rather than a filtered, mainstream idea of what's happening. And I find that very exciting. I appreciate you for allowing me to be able to call into your show, and I'll probably be looking for you next Sunday. I just found your stream last night when I was looking for the protest going on, and so I'll be looking for you next Sunday. Maybe we can get an update on this case and see where it's going.
Hopefully. I'm going to try and follow this as best I can, and I do appreciate and thank you for checking out the show and seeing what's going on, and we'll try and always keep it to highest quality possible to give you information, and we're always open to hear everyone's opinion, whether you agree or disagree, no matter what.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye. All right, folks. And as you can see, that again, the program is about hearing your voice, whether you agree or disagree, whether you have questions, and to have whatever answers that I can provide. I try to make sure that I'm informed as much as I can be on many subjects to be able to answer questions and to try and give you more information than the 30 seconds you may see on the news at any given time, and to correct some of the errors that the news media are presenting to the public as if it were true, so that you have a complete context to make whatever decision you think is important. And you may not agree with all of our answers, but that's okay. By the way, I do want to address, I know that Matt mentioned that the population of students from Broome County, SUNY Broome, and Binghamton University is approximately 25,000 students. I had mentioned about 10,000. I want to be clear. I was talking about Binghamton University, the population's about 10,000. Over at SUNY Broome, it's also about 10,000. Both of those are dropping. So you're correct. It's not 25,000 students at the moment. It's closer to about 20,000. But for any one of those, and I was speaking at that moment about Binghamton University, it's about 10,000. So if I wasn't being clear, I apologize for that. And Matt, yes, you're closer to correct in combining them both. I do see the comments from My 2 Cents and for Tina. Hello, Tina. Good to see you. Tina mentions that one of the problems with the social media is that they may complicate the investigation because they could corrupt some of the evidence and some of the testimony. I hope that doesn't happen. But again, that's one of the reasons why rampant rumors never are beneficial. It's one thing to say, well, this is where people got the interest and the knowledge of, but to push that as the answer can be a problem. And so we have to temper ourselves with it. And that's why on this program, we're not trying to, we have to be sure to acknowledge the allegations and to separate what's rumor and what we know is fact. Yes, Matt mentions that there should be more crackdown on fake IDs. I agree with that. But again, that's a problem of every college town, and it's always been a problem. I remember when I was going to college some decades ago, and we had fake IDs then, and we went in drinking under 21 in those days too. So, I mean, that's a constant problem. I don't think that in and of itself is a problem, but I especially think that if there are people who are underage drinking, having friends, drinking responsibly are critical factors, because otherwise you expose yourself to problems. And I'm not saying that that means you deserve the problem. I'm saying be aware. Be aware, be responsible. Even if you're going to drink underage, that doesn't mean you have to drink to excess. That doesn't excuse anyone, but don't give bad people opportunities where they don't need them. Restrict their ability to abuse you if you can, because bad people do bad things. But I'm not saying that that excuses them doing bad things. I do not believe that. My 2 cents. Hello, it's good to see you. And you say that from what I can see, the people who don't like the fact that you can carry a gun, knife, spray, etc., are the same shady people who want to harm you. I can't say that's always true, but you can see why criminals and those with nefarious intentions would prefer you to be less able to defend yourself than others. Let me see here. I'm catching up on all the comments. Tina mentions that Sunni would never advocate firearm training. They have safe spaces and are afraid of words. And I agree with you. I agree that they are terrified of words, of safe spaces, which is segregation. Yes, it's voluntary segregation, but that's segregation. And that's a problem because that's racism. To voluntarily segregate yourself is no different than to be forced to segregation. And that's we shouldn't want that. It's one thing to say, oh, I don't want to be part of a crowd. That's okay. But to say that you can't be around me because of your race or your religion or your political or sexual preferences, that's a problem, voluntary or not. And so we need to break with that. And like I said, why not try this? Why not say, hey, let's advocate for women being able to defend themselves in all the different ways that they possibly can. And let's make sure that they are safe and capable as they can be. And let's let the criminal elements and the predatory elements out there know that they may be in for more of a problem than they may have initially expected. That they're not going to be able to brute force their way into these bad situations, that women can defend themselves individually. And let's make it uncomfortable for the predators and the bad guys. Let's put some fear into them. I think it's worth doing. Who does it harm? How is it bad for women to be trained to defend themselves, to be able to know what a firearm is and know that they have that this Second Amendment absolute unalienable and right that cannot be infringed by government as defined by the Second Amendment, that this is their right, it is an option they have always had, and that they can use to their advantage. What's wrong with letting women know that and promoting it? God knows we did it in the 1950s, 1930s. We did it all the way up until the 1970s. What's the problem? I don't know. But that's, again, it's a concept, it's an idea. Not everyone will agree. I think it's possible. Matt mentions that the Binghamton University Wiki says there's 18,000 students, 2020. That wasn't correct in 2020, and it's not correct now. I've spoken to members of Binghamton University, various individuals at different levels of government, and their student population has been going down. I believe they're including those students who are also going online. And so that's why the numbers sound elevated. No, they're closer to about 12 to 13,000, possibly 10,000 at the last reporting that I have received from individuals at Binghamton University. But again, it adds to the population temporarily adds to the population here in the community. And of course, we need to look out for that very vulnerable. Those students are vulnerable. Even if it's 18,000, even if it's 25,000, including all colleges in the region, that's a very vulnerable, very susceptible community. They're easy to manipulate. They don't know as much. They don't know as much information exists. How many students don't realize that the Second Amendment isn't about hunting or recreation? How many understand that it is an intrinsic right in the United States? It may not be in other countries, but it is in the United States. And that they have that right and that option. And that they should be well trained about that. How many of them don't know that there is an alternative to the ideology that says you must, if you're white, you must be a racist, and if you're black, you must be a victim? There is an alternative way of looking at the world. And the solution to whatever racism does exist in the world doesn't lie in replacing one form of racism with another form of racism. We can introduce that, but if we're not telling them that, if we're not giving them access to that information, if the internet overlords are blocking that information from them, and if their schools are putting them on rails so that's the only thing that they see and the only conclusion they're allowed to make, well, that leads to a very predictable outcome, which is not to the best interest of anyone. And I think that's important to mention. Again, you may not agree. And I know some of the internet is upset with some of the things I've been saying, been messing with the feeds. So I do appreciate those who are continuing to stay with us and be able to speak to us. And I do appreciate the people who are calling in and asking questions and looking at this from different points of view so that we all can learn, because we can all expand and we can all become better. At least that's what I would hope for. Wow, we've been doing this for 3 hours. I love speaking to you guys. I love this conversation. I always love speaking every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And by the way, let me say it again. If you've made it 3 hours in watching this program, I thank you and I appreciate you. And I want you to know, please like, share, subscribe. Share this with your friends and subscribe. And know that every Sunday at 2:30 p.m., we go live to hear your voice and your opinion on these issues. Whether or not it agrees with me doesn't matter. I want to hear your voice from anywhere in the world because we believe in your right to speak. Free speech. It is a unalienable right of everyone in the world. Whether your government agrees or not, that's your right. And we want to hear your voice on all these issues and others as well. Mike mentions the Giants are losing. Really? The Giants are down 27. Ugh. See, I haven't been happy with football since Colin Kaepernick. But Giants are my team. And of course, I'm missing the game because I'm here with you guys, but I think this is more important. There was a kid beat in Rec Park. When? No, I'm not familiar with that. But I was also thinking about the international aspects. Because I do want to mention again, folks, you're going to see this in 2020. This is very important. What's happening in the Ukraine is a result of what happened in Afghanistan. And that is going to affect what's happening with the Iran nuclear deal, which we've been talking about a lot on this program. We're one of the few who've been consistently covering it and trying to make you up to date about it. It has a lot to do with what's happening in China and with Taiwan. This is important, and this is not going away. And the government, the government that we have in place, come on, there it goes, is going to be very important. Because even though I believe that Joe Biden will not make it through, he will not, in January 2023, we're going to have Kamala Harris as in the Oval Office. And I think that the groundwork, though, is still going to be a problem. And if we don't prepare for that now, it gets worse. Back in February, we told you that the second half of 2021, the economy would crash. You can go back, February 17th, 2021. We said that on this program. We're right. We have to prepare. Jason mentions that there was an incident in October reported by WMBF this week. I didn't hear about that. I may have known it in October, but I don't know about it now. And by the way, I hope if anyone's watching WMBF, please take Bob and put him to task about his mask mandates, about his walking around a mask, that you have to walk around about with a mask, but he doesn't. Well, Jason, I'll have to look at that afterwards and check that out. And yes, we are on Twitter as well as Rumble. So we do see your comments in social media, and we do try to respond to them as much as we can. And we do appreciate everyone who sends us information and also reaches out to us and reaches us on any social media to speak about whatever they think, as long as you're respectful, as long as you're not just hurling some personal insult, which we get as well. But otherwise, we do like to hear your voice. So I've covered a lot today, I think. We've covered, and as you noticed at the beginning of the show, for the holidays, we're playing Carol of the Bells, and we're starting the show earlier. So if you notice that we're starting to stream at about 3-4 minutes before 2:30, so about 2:26 thereabout. And you'll notice that we're doing that because we're playing Carol of the Bells. It's the holidays, the holiday spirit. And then we start the show at approximately 2:30, 2:31 every Sunday each time, Eastern Standard Time. So that's why you see us start a couple minutes early, and then you see the show start up. But in total today, and the theme that was today, Brian Williams was correct. And I mean, listen to everything we've talked about, every call that's come in, all the issues we're talking about. And what you see is America's burning. There are a small group of individuals, very progressive, very left-leaning, democratic socialists, predominantly. They've decided to burn down our nation. They have threatened us in the cities like BLM, New York has threatened to burn down New York City. And Eric Adams is trying to respond to that. We've heard them say that in Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. We've seen the riots in New York State and Rochester, the protests that they've done throughout this nation. And they want to burn it all down with us inside. And we should be scared. But not only should we be scared, we should be also confident that we have a solution. And that solution is not just blindly listening to a soundbite of 30 seconds or a minute and a half in the major news media that hides the truth from us, that misinforms us intentionally or unintentionally, and provides us with less information than we actually need to have. More information is out there. And it's never a bad thing to have a shred of doubt, to ask for more information, to seek out more information, and to educate yourself about the various issues that are affecting us all. And to look at what's happening around the world and to consider the consequences of what we are doing, because it's not just affecting us. When New York City is allowing illegal aliens and non-citizens to vote, it doesn't just affect New York City. It affects everyone because they then can vote in federal elections. That means it's affecting Congress. It means that it's affecting the laws we make and the way that the United States interacts with other countries around the world. There is no limitation there. The consequences continue further than where the end of the politician's conversation is. When we allow mobs to rule our country because of social media and in person, and we allow people to manipulate people with their emotions, that hurts everyone. Because other people in the world and people in other parts of the country emulate that, and it gets worse. It doesn't get better. There's a lot that we have to consider and a lot that we have to think of, because we can put out the fire that some have started to burn down America. We can save America. We can keep this nation to continue to be the greatest nation in the world. And we are. Anyone who tells you America is not the greatest nation in the world is a liar, in my opinion. They are lying to you. And I can prove that. It's really easy. There are millions, 5 million people waiting in line to come and become Americans. There are 11 million people, if not more, that have illegally entered America to live the American life. No other nation can say that. No other nation has the diversity America has. No other nation has the freedom and the opportunity that America has. Does that mean we're perfect? No, not nearly. Not even close. But we are great. We are the greatest nation in the history of the world. That just because we are doesn't mean we always will be. That's a process. We have to work at it. And we need to work at it together, not separately. I want to thank everyone, and thank you, Mike. I thank you all for taking the time to be with us today on this live stream. We look forward to seeing you every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I hope if you have the opportunity, please, folks, go out, do look at the coverage that we provided of what is being taught to students at SUNY Broome. And which is the same thing that is being taught at colleges across this nation. And I want you to please take an opportunity and watch the actual live stream of the Me Too event and what Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow did with that event, so that you are informed and you know what's going on and that you can come to whatever conclusion you wish about that information. With that being said, I want to thank you once again. I hope you all will be well, and and I look forward to seeing you next week. By the way, we do about 3 episodes throughout the week. Please keep an eye out for that as well. Until the next time, folks, thank you.